Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1418 of the War News stream. And we have very big news once again tonight. We have seen that the Iranians have escalated their massacre yet again, as Iran is now threatening U.S. forces in the region. We've also seen a very big attack on a Moscow military site by Ukrainian partisans, an arson attack that is, and also Turkish forces are escalating near Aleppo, Syria, and moving more forces in, and that situation is also popping off quite fast, and it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as significant developments have emerged from basically every single corner of the world once again today, but primarily out of the Middle East and Eastern Europe. We have been able to get reports from the armed forces of Ukraine overnight that another significant drone attack has been conducted on the Russian Federation's territory, with a larger amount of strikes being seen within the area of the Russian Don regions south of Volgograd and also within the Caspian Sea, as several major oil rigs of the Russian Federation's Lukoil company were hit and caused heavy damage over the course of the night by the Ukrainian drone attacks. Meanwhile, oil depots and other critical infrastructure vital to the Russian economy and its continuance in the war effort has also been hit and heavily damaged as well, while several more hits have also been reported within the city of Voronezh in the second night in a row. It appears that the city of Voronezh is being hit in a significantly large amount compared to other targets and cities over around the past week, and it appears that the Ukrainian armed forces have some sort of a larger strategic target in hitting and destroying key sites and facilities throughout the area of the city of Voronezh. The Russian Federation has even seen an attack conducted by Ukrainian partisans within the Moscow city area, as a significant comms tower appears to have been attacked and destroyed by the partisans, or at least heavily damaged at this moment, after the partisans were able to make it into the secured area around the site and also throw Molotovs into significant electronics boxes at the bottom of the comms tower. We've seen that within the Middle East, the Islamic Republic of Iran is still dealing with an ongoing revolution, but video and picture evidence as of today is even less prevalent than other days. And we have seen that ever since the Islamic Republic of Iran nearly 72 hours ago started to shut off its internet throughout the country and also started to jam Starlink access throughout the area, there has not been a significant amount of video and picture evidence coming out from the ground over wider swaths of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Still, we were able to get enough statements and enough reports from the ground that it appears that the amount of casualties that has been sustained by the revolutionaries today is once again exceedingly large. And we have also been able to hear that even according to internal Iranian governmental sources, nearly 110 security members or security service officials and members have been killed at this moment in the ongoing revolution. The Islamic Republic of Iran has also resorted to openly threatening U.S. forces within the region if we were to get involved in some form of a strike. This is coming as the President of the United States is continuing to state that there will be some sort of help given to the Iranian people, although we have seen many statements proving the contrary, that really no U.S. large force deployments are expected within the Middle East at this time, and it even appears that the conference and briefing that will be had to see what can be done in support of Iran will only be held on this Tuesday, and an action or decision has not necessarily been made at this moment, as the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense will be meeting with the President on Tuesday to further discuss the actions that the United States of America may take in support of the Islamic Republic of Iran, meaning that right now there is some knee-jerk preparatory action being done in the terms of flights by KC-135 and KC-46 Stratotankers, along with additional support and equipment being brought in by C-17 Globemasters and C-5 Galaxies, but outside of that, it does not appear that the United States of America is ready in any capacity to start airstrikes on the Islamic Republic of Iran at this moment right now, at least according to public information and sources. Additionally, we have seen that the Syrian civil war is still ongoing, and the Syrian interim government's armed forces are continuing to move more forces into the area of Aleppo as battles continue to rage within the Sheikh Massoud neighborhood or suburb of the city of Aleppo. Turkish armed forces have also been seen building up in larger numbers within the Turkish-controlled areas of the Idlib province, suggesting that the Republic of Turkey is planning once again to conduct some form of military action in support of the Syrian interim government, possibly against the Syrian Democratic Forces, which find themselves besieged within the northern neighborhood of Sheikh Massoud within Aleppo. At the same time, the Israelis have also stated that they actually believe that the U.S. might help Iranian protesters soon, although once again, there's a whole bunch of reports saying one thing or the other, and we've also seen that Israeli airstrikes were conducted in southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River today, against Hezbollah forces within that area. Meanwhile, we have also seen that within Europe, the one top NATO official has stated that significant cooperation is building between the Russians, the Chinese, and the North Koreans, which is once again openly threatening the stability and prosperity of the NATO alliance, and stern actions need to be made in preparation for common defense if these Axis powers were to launch some sort of an act of aggression against NATO states. While at the same time, a drone has been sighted, in a somewhat rare instance at least recently, over the Oslo airport, which did lead to a closure of one of the runways while the drone sighting was being investigated. We've also heard a direct statement from the Danish Prime Minister stating that Greenland is not for sale or for annexation under any circumstances, and that Denmark, by the best of their military abilities, will defend Greenland to the very last, if necessary, against the United States' attempted annexation or an attempted purchase of the Greenland island. We have also been able to hear other statements from around the rest of the world that are fairly significant in their own right, and we are going to be making sure to get through all of that news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on into the smaller ones throughout the night. And I do want to say, folks, that tonight we have an absolutely significant fundraiser for Razom For Ukraine. Hey!
Let's go!
And how much has been raised on that, Matthew? How much has been raised?
So far already, before he got done with the entry, it was already up to about $700 raised
Dang.
of the $2,500 goal. So we're already going strong this early in. So it's a very good sight to see.
And that is absolutely incredible, folks. And hopefully we'll be able to see that the $2,500 goal is hit within the first hour. I'm sure that the LSA can do it because nothing is beyond the achievements of the Lee Spring Army. But with that, it's time for us to move on, folks, into our major news throughout the day, moving us directly on and into the Russian Federation, as more significant Ukrainian drone strikes have been conducted throughout the country overnight. The Ukrainian armed forces for nearly a month, or a little bit over a month at this point, have been conducting literal nightly attacks against the Russian Federation with their strategic drone forces. Ukrainian drones are quite varied in type and design, but generally the most commonly used form of strategic long-range drone that we've ever seen the Ukrainian armed forces use is the Lyuti long-range drone. And I'll actually show you all that one here, because from what we know, this is the one that was used heavily last night. And let me see here if I can get it. And this is the drone right here. They're fairly large, and I would say that they're fairly comparable, at least in size, to that of a Bayraktar TB2 drone that's produced by the Baykar company in Turkey, but these drones are quite significant in their ability to be able to hit targets with a decent amount of payload. We understand that the explosive mass within them is somewhere around 150 pounds to 100 pounds, and they also are significant in range. The farthest out that we've ever seen a Liudi hit a target is around 900 miles, or 850 miles approximately. This means that these drones are able to target largely everything within the Western Russian Federation, and not only that, generally deal a decent amount of damage whenever they strike their targets, meaning that this is the go-to drone by Ukrainian armed forces to conduct their long-range attacks, which is what we saw exactly last night. More attacks were conducted throughout the Russian Don region and also the Caspian Sea, with some hits being reported within Volgograd and Rostov on what appeared to be fuel depots, but most importantly, we saw attacks conducted within the northern part of the Caspian Sea. This is a new field of targets that has only been opened up recently by the Ukrainian long-range drone forces, as it has been viewed that there's a great deal of strategic potential in striking and destroying Russian oil rigs out at sea within the Caspian Sea that actually produce raw crude oil for the Russian Federation to refine and process. It's also due to the fact that these oil rigs are a significant financial investment by the companies that operate them, that they pose incredibly strategic targets due to the fact that hitting one of these and damaging him can cause a significant loss in the investments that a company like Lukoil made in actually setting up and operating that oil rig, and also due to the fact that oil rig workers of every variety are usually paid far more than the oil operators and oil technicians that operate on land. For this reason, the Ukrainians have decided to generally conduct attacks on these rigs for the strategic purposes of dwindling down Russia's economical abilities and also dwindling down the abilities economically of Russia's major oil companies, especially that of Lukoil. And over the course of the day, we did get to see video footage published by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense showing us these very attacks conducted on the Russian oil rigs out at sea. Here's the clip. We can see the drone coming in and aiming right for the main rig platform, and we can also see another one coming in and hitting another refinery, or I'm sorry, a rig, somewhere out in the Caspian. We can now see a completely separate refinery, apparently with only two platforms, also being hit directly by one of these drones. When you see the fire raging on this one as a second drone comes in and appears to be hitting the taller superstructure off to the right side of the rig. We now see a third drone coming in on this very same rig, the cloud of smoke from the second explosion still seen on screen, as it also lands its hit, apparently near to what appears to be the left side of the main structure of the rig platform.
It's amazing the whole thing just didn't go up when the first drone hit it, because these things are extremely flammable. Like everything on one of these oil platforms is highly flammable. So any type of explosion or anything like that seems like it would just set the whole thing ablaze.
It really does. It's really crazy to see that nothing appears to have exploded or caught on fire rapidly at that moment, but we can confirm that the Ukrainian armed forces apparently caused enough damage to these rigs that we are hearing that they are out of operation, at least for the moment, as the Russian Federation is going to be trying to effect repairs on these systems and see that they're eventually brought back up to some sort of operational capacity. A lot of these rigs are actually not that far off of the coast. Generally, from what we know, most of the Russian oil rigs are within the Russian exclusive economic zone, meaning that at the farthest they're probably about 100 miles into the Caspian Sea within this general area of the northern side, but they also have to share an exclusive economic zone with Kazakhstan, meaning that most of these rigs, while we have not been able to geolocate them, are probably within this area that I'm circling with the mouse cursor on screen, which isn't that far off of the Russian coast within the Don region and is well within Ukrainian strike distance. Most Ukrainian drones easily fly 850 miles into the Russian Federation to strike their targets, including targets that we've seen like Izhevsk, which was generally 934 miles away from the state of Ukraine and its general launching points, and that means that these oil platforms within a similar area are actually well within reach. Most of them at the longest range would only be about 700 miles away from the state of Ukraine. Once again, these attacks are not being conducted to dwindle down any of Russia's usable fuel reserves in terms of diesel or gasoline that could be used by the Russian economy to keep it rolling. It's actually the fact that these are significant financial investments. Rigs are incredibly expensive to even build, much less to put into position and then operate on a continuous basis. And oil rigs, to be able to return the investment that their companies made, have to operate on a 24/7 schedule, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop. there is very rarely a cease in production from an oil rig, usually for inspections and also repair work. They usually would be seen that there will be pauses for necessary maintenance such as that, but you generally do not see oil rigs going out for days on end in unscheduled maintenance, because that would start to cause significant losses to the companies that operate these rigs. These attacks will be doing just that, as they will most likely have to shut down all of the operations on the affected rigs and start to affect repairs, or try and assess even the damage that was caused and the financial cost of repairing the damage that was caused to these rigs. Either way, Lukoil, which was the primary target of this attack, will be suffering significant financial losses in any direction that they go, whether they try and repair the damage or whether they just shut down the rigs while they figure it out, because these rigs will not be producing any crude oil that they will be able to attempt to export out of the Russian Federation to turn some money for themselves and also for the Russian Federation's government. So these attacks were incredibly significant within the Caspian Sea, and it does appear that the Russian Federation is once again going to be dealing with further economic quagmires. Moving us on over and into the area of the Volgograd region, and specifically towards Zhitovo 2E, which is a very romantic name of a town. You know, many people sit there and when they say, "Where do you live?" you know, they say something like, "I live in Richmond," or "I live in Boston," or, you know, even in Russia, they say something like, "I live in St. Petersburg," or "I live in Moscow." Zhitovo 2E just really has that pure romantic feel. Nothing says romance like 2E.
It feels like a data point or something, like Zatovo 2E, like 2 East or something. I'm not really sure, but it sounds a little cringy.
It sounds wonderful, folks. It sounds like a place that you really want to live. And let's see if we got a street view. Oh, this town's actually so poor, folks, they didn't even bother giving it a street view. So I can't even show y'all what the town of Zhitovo looks like. And also, apparently the town is so busy being depressed about its horrendous state, nobody's taken a single picture of Zhitovo 2E, rather than today. We're about to get to that. Around the area of Zhitovo is some form of an oil depot, and I was not able to geolocate it on air, but it may also be near to Zhitovo 1YE. That's also a likelihood as well, as there's actually a lot of Zhitovos around this area, and they just decided that instead of giving the towns different names, which would have been making my job incredibly easy, they actually just gave them all the same name and then put some sort of a serial number designation behind it, like you could scan this thing on a barcode and buy the whole town for $3 and some odd change. So unfortunately, I don't know what Zhitovo it is. It's either Zhitovo 2E or Zhitovo 1YE. We're not really sure which one, but an oil depot was hit within the area of one of these towns and appears to have been on fire quite significantly. Also, I want y'all to note that this was Zhitovo in the Volgograd region, which is the best that anyone could do today on geolocation, and there are already just 2 Zhitovos in this area. And there were about a couple of others as well within the Volgograd Oblast, and to be entirely honest with y'all, I could not figure out where the oil depot was amongst the Zhitovos. Would the real Zhitovo please stand up and let us know where the oil depot was? Still, the oil depot did get hit overnight by the Ukrainian drones, and it was on fire. Here's the clip.
Notice how the firefighters are standing about, I don't know, a mile away from the fire. Also, look at that little janky fire truck. Is that a fire van?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
That's
it is.
Fire Sprinter van or something. It's like their version of a Sprinter, but for a fire truck. I've never seen anything quite like that.
I've never seen anything like that myself. I don't really know what purpose that serves. It's like, is that the fire chief's car? Like, and if so, why does he need a van? I have a lot of questions about this, folks, and it doesn't really appear, at least at this point, that any firefighting efforts were being conducted at all. It appears that the firefighters basically showed up to watch the fire burn. So I really wouldn't call them firefighters, at least at this moment. I call them more so fire watchers. I think that's a more appropriate term for these guys. But it appears that they're just watching the oil depot burning and on fire in the distance. Also, by the way, I do have to add for everyone's knowledge that it is really hard to fight these fires once they start, especially at this sort of a scale. There could be some sort of a explosion that happens unpredictably within the area, and if any firefighters are nearby to one of these silos trying to put the fire out and that happens, a lot of those firefighters might get fried and that might be their last day on the job. So that might also be the reason why they're this far back, is because none of them want to get caught in the blast radius if one of these silos has some sort of an explosive combustion, if we want to call it that. So generally this fire is going to burn out of control, and the firefighters are basically there just to document this at this point and watch how far this burns and how much damage it causes to this oil depot. Additionally, not only in Volgograd were there attacks on oil depots, but there was also some additional attacks that happened within the area of the Rostov region, somewhat within Rostov-on-Don itself. You can actually see the impact right here, even at the beginning of this clip. When you see that the police have arrived.
Yeah, it looks like they're there to make sure that they arrest the fire. This bastard's gotten out of control. Got to take him to the slammer. But it seems like Rostov-on-Don, Belgrade, they've been getting just like the really tail end of this junk. They've been getting slammed left and right.
They're not doing well, that's for sure. And we also got an additional clip of the morning attack that was conducted on the Rostov region as well. Actually, this was within Luhansk, but from what we understand, these drones then flew on into the Rostov region. Correction there, but here's the clip. There goes one of them.
That's a slow boy.
We can also see another Liudi right there on its way to Rostov. It looks so graceful, you know, just gliding through the air like that. And we see some Russian.
Oh, we have a little something. A little squiggly air defense.
This guy turned into John Lennon here at the end. He said, "Imagine all the people." It's like, bro, get the hell out of here. What the hell are you even talking about? But beyond that, the Rostov region also appears to have been hit. But unfortunately, folks, we were not able to get any good geolocation on what exactly was hit within this area. It actually seemed, at least from what we could tell, to give y'all a very rough estimate at the moment, that whatever was hit was kind of near the Don River area, somewhere near to the waterfront. Or the riverfront, if you want to call it that. So we don't know exactly what's been hit at the moment, but if I had to take a rough guess, just to try and give you an idea of probably what happened in this area, it looks like the Ukrainians may have hit some sort of building or structure here on the southern side of the river, which is generally where most of the industrial areas of the city are, to try and hit something that may be considered strategic infrastructure for the Russian Federation and its maritime capabilities out of Rostov-on-Don. That's what we're generally assuming at the moment, but once again, folks, take that with a bit of a grain of salt. Geolocation wasn't really that fruitful today on that video, and I really couldn't find out exactly what was hit to an exact T within the area of Rostov-on-Don. Moving us out of the Rostov region, however, and on over towards Belbek, just to make sure that we cover the Crimean news a little bit. We didn't get any video or picture evidence of this, but every time these reports come out, they are always true. It's just that it takes about a day to get the footage from the Ukrainian MOD. But around the area of the Belbek airfield, seen here, there were reports of air defense fire and explosions happening around the airport. This is incredibly common. And usually every single time these attacks are conducted, the Russians lose something somewhat significant. The last time that an attack happened within this area, the Russians lost a radar system for an S-400 and for an S-350 Vityaz. They also lost a Pantsir S-1 and a MiG-29 that was on the tarmac in the midst of the attack. A fairly significant loss to be seen within a singular attack, especially in the air defense category. We are believing that something similar may have happened tonight, where Russian air defenses around the area of the airbase may have been targeted once again, or they may have been attempting to target and destroy Russian aircraft that were here on the ramp. We're not entirely sure which, and we're still trying to find that one out at the moment, but that's generally what we're believing. The reports of the explosions are coming from at this point is from the Belbek airfield and direct attacks that were sustained near the area of the perimeter. Moving on out of Crimea, it's now time for us to get closer to Moscow, and to the pretty big one that happened today that was actually kind of wild. Moving us on up into Voronezh, it appears that Voronezh may have been attacked a second time today. According to reports that came out of the city, there's a massive attack by Ukrainian drones on my beloved and native Voronezh. By the way, this is translated from Russian into English, in case y'all are wondering. They are hitting residential buildings. As promised yesterday in the mass reports of the Russian press, Ukraine is horrified by the Oreshnik strike. True, no one ever told or showed where he actually ended up. He is the missile, by the way. Ukraine writes that he landed not at a gas storage facility, but at an aircraft repair plant. That was never reported by the Ukrainians that landed on a gas facility. But they are probably horrified by this too. I read in our news yesterday the Ukrainians were mad with fear. Or maybe our press has gone mad in a paroxysm, what a hell of a word, of self-promotion. One of two. Just in case they are not afraid of any nut. All right. Apparently Diddy showed up at the end of this comment when he was writing. He's like, they're not afraid of nut. But anyways, beyond that, according to Roy TV, Maxim Kalashnikov then wrote this article. We can do it again, didn't work. So the Ukrainian war has now lasted longer than the Great Patriotic War. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that to y'all like 2 nights ago. As of right now, the war in Ukraine is now longer than the Soviet Union's involvement in the Second World War against Nazi Germany. Just to make that a little bit clear for everyone, this war has now gone on longer than the Soviet Union Ukrainians' war to defeat Nazi Germany in the Second World War, and they still are no closer to winning in Ukraine than they were about 3 years ago. So it's safe to say the long-lasting propaganda slogan, "We can do it again," has certainly failed. You can. In the 5th year of the trench warfare in Ukraine, both the leadership and the top command centers, civilian and military, are intact. The bridges across the Dnipro and major railway junctions are intact, and our infantry is forced to pay with its bodies, people versus drones, for the snail's progress. It's not even the snail's progress. If y'all also haven't heard this, if a snail was moving at a non-stop pace from day one of the invasion of the war in Ukraine, from the front line that existed right outside Donetsk, west, it actually would have made it about 2/3 of the way through Poland at this point, and would almost be making its way into Germany. So the Russians don't even have a snail's pace. They are moving at a pace that is so slow it cannot even be measured. Which is the funniest thing about this, is that a snail's pace is even an overstatement of what the Russians have been doing. All of this is already leading to irreversible upheavals within Russia after the war. My heart is very heavy, and I'm keeping my emotions in check as much as possible. It's already clear that the US and China will reap all the benefits of this war, while the Russians will be left with blood, ruin, and losses. This is undoubtedly a game changer and a triumph of foreign policy. And we also were able to hear from Romulan of Light, many who understand what is happening are concerned about the real, including international reputation, of the motherland are in quiet depression. Everyone is waiting for at least some kind of comment or statement from the Supreme, which is Putin. So...
Yeah. That's never a good sign when your name is Romanov Light. Like, sounds like it's named after a beer or something. You know, the Russians have a bad reputation for kind of being somewhat leaning toward the alcoholism side of things. So you don't want to call yourself Romanov Light inside of Russia. That's probably not a good thing. But it is crazy, though. They're basically openly questioning the failures of the Putin regime at this point. And this is not the first time we've seen this. About 2 weeks ago, we saw 2 different bloggers also question the failures on Putin's part. And this seems to be picking up steam. Slowly but surely over time, it seems like more and more people are questioning the strategy.
And it really does seem like a lot of people are starting to point out that things just aren't really going well, including even the military bloggers within Voronezh and elsewhere in the country, which the first one was from Voronezh, the rest of them were from throughout the Russian Federation, but they're heavily followed military blogger accounts within the country. So it appears that at the moment we're getting a general understanding that a lot more people are starting to openly criticize the Russian Federation's government, even including Putin at this point, about how badly the strategy has gone and how significant the failures are. To put this into perspective for everyone, let me go pull up the Great Patriotic War. If y'all do not know, the Great Patriotic War is the name that the Russian Federation, or the Soviet Union, gave to World War II. And let me see if I can get the amount of time that this war lasted. So, let's see here.
That's the one where I think that's the one where America won that war on their behalf, and the Soviets kind of just sort of reaped the benefits.
Yeah, I generally think that's the case. I gotta be honest with y'all, folks. The Soviet Union did basically nothing in World War II but die in mass. That was all they did. And you know, like that counts for something in some metrics. But if everyone else in the world has to supply you with the equipment so that way you can drive yourself to the front line to get shot, were you really doing a lot? That's really the question that we're asking here today, folks. But let me go get y'all something else here. Let me go get the Ukraine war right here. So let me go to Wikipedia here, and we're going to start with. Let's see here, the invasion into Ukraine in 2022, and it doesn't actually appear that they'll give us that time frame here on the Russo-Ukrainian War Wikipedia, but the Eastern Front in World War II lasted for 3 years, 10 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days. Right now, if we were to take that same deal right there, and we were to divide that down by the 1,418 days that we have right now, let me go and get that for y'all really quickly. Let me go and whip out my calculator because I don't want to get that wrong. So 1,418 days divided by 365 days in a year. That means that right now, this war in Ukraine is now longer than the Second World War, at least for the Soviet Union. Right now, we are looking at this almost becoming a full 4 years of war, actually. We are only 1 month away from that happening, and that means that we are now in a war that is longer than the Second World War for the Soviet Union. That brings a lot of people to start wondering, at least within Russia, considering that this is a full-scale conventional war, it's not a forever war like a counterinsurgency conflict is, like, say, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, or the Russian war in Chechnya, or, for example, the U.S. war in Vietnam. It's not that kind of a conflict where it can just go on endlessly with basically no end in sight because the enemy is incredibly elusive. This is a full-scale conventional war. They're literally looking down Ukrainians on the other side of the field, or generally looking down their drones on the other side of the field as they're barreling right towards the Russian positions and obliterating them, and for about 4 straight years, nothing has changed. If you look at a map, folks, from 2023 of what the Ukraine war front line looked like then versus what it looks like now, there is basically very little difference between the two. The Russians controlled about 20% of all Ukrainian territory around the early part of 2023, and in the present day right now, in 2026, they still only control 20% of Ukraine's territory, meaning that they made basically no territorial gains over about 3.5 straight years at this point. And this has led a lot of people to wonder about these comments that these Russian military bloggers are making, where they're openly criticizing the Russian Federation, and wondering what is going to be happening as a result of a lot of people seeming to start becoming incredibly unfriendly to the idea of this conflict within the Russian Federation. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we're seeing Russian blogger after Russian blogger openly question Putin's war strategy and failures inside of Ukraine. And the big question to the audience is, will this turn ugly? And it looks like 39% said no, it will not, because it will be stopped by the Putin regime, while 28% said yes, an uprising is in the works, and 24% said it will remain isolated because the citizens are in fear of speaking out. So generally, the basic calculus is this: are the Russian civilians getting hurt by Putin's actions so much that it overrides the fear they have about speaking out? And it looks like, at least for a handful of bloggers, which are people with a pretty large voice inside of Russia, that equation is starting to flip toward the other side, where basically if they don't speak out, then they know their country is going to be destroyed. So that's why they're speaking out, in my personal opinion. I think an uprising is quietly in the works, but you have to remember, though, that the FSB is the new era KGB. They watch everybody inside of Russia. So the moment these individuals even make a statement remotely questioning the Putin regime, they are going to be under some very, very close scrutiny. And if they make any further statements, that could lead to very unintended consequences for those individuals. So, in other words, the Putin regime will come after them. That's what I'm basically trying to say here. But at this point, though, with this situation lasting so long and lasting longer than World War II, it's nearly impossible not to question the strategy, because this is basically becoming Russia's war on terror, like the U.S. had in the Middle East, except the difference is the Ukraine government is now attacking Russia directly in their mainland, which is a lot different than the wars that we had in Afghanistan and the Middle East. So this right here is not going well for them. It's destroying their whole economy, and there's no end in sight. That's the problem. There is no end in sight. So I think this will turn ugly eventually, but there's still a long way to go before enough people rise up to actually make a difference inside of Russia. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with 39%. I have a feeling that this is generally going to be suppressed by the Russian government, and they're just going to move on forward. We know that based off of prior statements that have been made within the Russian Federation by people who have not been a big fan of the government, generally that sort of dissent does not last too long. And so for that reason, we'll highly expect that these people will either be threatened or they'll be silenced, and the war will continue. The Russian government has absolutely no intention of bending to public will, either from the Western world, and especially not from inside of their own country. So for that reason, anyone who criticizes the war in Ukraine or anything else about that will probably be met with some form of criminal action leveraged against them or levied against them to be able to try and silence them or put them in prison where they will not be able to speak anymore against the ongoing war. The Russian Federation's government, through Vladimir Putin, also believes that the war is incredibly crucial and also has greater plans to expand the war at some point in the eventual future to the rest of the eastern frontier of NATO, including the Baltic states, Poland, and most likely Finland. So for that reason, they're absolutely not going to let any dissension happen at this point right now, as this is just the stepping stone or the starting phase to the rest of the actions and ambitions that they have through the rest of Europe. So I would have a feeling, folks, this isn't really going to be going all too far. And if we've learned anything from inside the Russian Federation, never expect the Russian public to rise up in revolution against their government. It takes mountains and earth to move to see that happen. It basically has only happened really once in Russian history, which would be the Russian Revolution of 1917. The collapse of the Soviet Union really happened because of internal bureaucratic strife within the Soviet Politburo and also within the Supreme Soviet itself. So it didn't really have a lot to do with the public, at least within the Soviet Union, leading to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It was more so the internal squabbling of the Soviet government itself. Although I will say, though, some people are going to be like, Lithuania and all the Baltic states and so on and so forth. That's true, but what I'm talking about here is with the Federative Soviet Republic of Russia, which is a specific part of the Soviet Union, is not reflective of the rest of the Soviet republics that heavily wanted independence. The internal situation in Russia, even during the collapse of the Soviet Union, was more so an internally led bureaucratic affair than it was one led by the public itself. So I hope that does address it at least the best I can. In my opinion, I just don't really think that there is a high chance of any form of a revolution within Russia. You also have to remember, folks, that as far as other cultures go throughout the world, the Russians are built on a culture of heavy exploitation, and it's generally expected by the Russian public that they are to be exploited, and there really is no way that they can say or do anything about it, because they'll just get their head chopped off if they try to. And that government has existed for as long as a concept of a Russian state has existed. The Russian state only came into existence in the modern day after the Mongol invasion of the 13th century by Genghis Khan and then later on his sons, who continued their reign through the Golden Horde and other groups within the region. This created an incredibly exploitative system of government that generally ensures that there is some form of pressure from the top, and as long as you meet those requirements from the top, it doesn't matter how much suffering you put on the people below you, as long as you're able to meet the requirements of paying some form of a tribute. And the Russian government still operates on that premise about 800 years later in the modern day, and there's no reason to believe that anyone further on down, lower on in the Russian societal system, like the average citizen, would ever sit there and go, hey, I don't really like being screwed over every single day of the week, because it's literally culturally ingrained that if you're at the bottom of the system, you're getting screwed over every day of the week, and it's been like that for 800 years. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, at least to the best.
You know what is interesting, though, if you look at it, like, for example, the main driving force behind what's happening in Iran right now, which is a full-on, full-blown revolution, by the way, inside of Iran, the main reason being cited for it is the huge financial difficulties that they're having inside the country. Nobody can afford anything. Also, a secondary issue is they're running out of water, and they're not properly maintaining their infrastructure. That's another thing. So the Russian economy, being on the fringes for so long, literally the only thing holding the Russian economy together is the war industry. And that's a huge problem too. That's a catch-22, because now even if Russia thought that ending the war was a good idea, they really just can't, because that's the last string holding their economy together. And the moment the war industry stops, they literally have very few sources of revenue from that point forward. So that was some very stupid strategizing on Putin's part to be a chess master, allegedly. That was really dumb. He backed himself into a corner where he has no options left anymore, because without that war industry churning out equipment and also producing revenue, then Russia is screwed at that point.
And I would have to say that it generally is not a good move that the Russians made at all. And another thing, folks, that I have to say, wars are an absolute last resort, because it destroys a lot more than it ever gains. And that's one thing that we always have to say on the channel, is that it's always an action of last resort. Like, whenever we say on the channel the U.S. should get involved in military operations against Iran, that is generally the last resort that we're at, because they're in the middle of developing a nuclear weapon. And we either deal with that now, or we never get the chance to deal with it. And considering how unstable their nation is, if they were to possess a nuclear weapon, who knows what would happen. That's generally a last resort action. But you never want to sit there like the Russians do as a way of life, and then just go around threatening wars with people and invading them. Because if you look at Russia's history over the past 20 or so years, since they conducted the Second Chechen War, the invasion of Georgia, the annexation of Crimea, and the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 in full, it has never turned out well for them in any way. The invasion of Georgia in 2008 and 2009 generally cut the Russian Federation out of the Western world at large, because it was such an aggressive move against a country that wasn't even attempting to join NATO at the moment, from what we understand. There was a little bit of a murmuring within Georgia that they maybe would like to join some form of an EU customs union. And even still, that was very difficult to even argue, because they weren't going to be accepted by the European Union, and then the Russians invaded them for the hell of it. Then after that, we saw that the Ukrainians had a revolution of dignity, or the Maidan, or the Euromaidan as it's called, where they overthrew the Russian puppet Yanukovych within their country, who had basically been installed by the Russians and was heavily leaning towards the Russians, and generally continued the institutional corruption that many people complain that Ukraine still has to this day. And they conducted an overthrow of that government to bring in a pro-EU, pro-NATO governance. And since then, we've seen that the Russian Federation returned that in kind by annexing Crimea and then starting a proxy war, which they were directly involved in the Donbass. Then after that, after showing everyone basically around Russia how dangerous it was to be a Russian neighbor without being a part of the Western world, then we saw that Zelensky was elected after, let's see here, what was his name? Poroshenko, who was the president before Zelensky, and Zelensky started to say that they would generally like to join the European Union and NATO for security reasons and also for economic prosperity purposes. Then the Russian Federation just goes and conducts a full-on invasion on them. That was a terribly bad idea on the Russians' part, because they're invading Ukraine because Ukraine wants to have the economic success of most other Western countries that have joined the EU and NATO, and also the security guarantees that come along with it. And Russia then, in return, basically obliterated any economic relations that they had with Europe, which actually made them money. So in the process of trying to destroy Ukraine's chance at having some prosperity, the Russians destroyed their own chance at prosperity of just selling stuff to the Europeans still. That's a bad move.
Yeah. And also, I mean, people speculate that the generals lied to Putin is the reason why he went headfirst into the situation. They believe that they told Putin and convinced him that they truly could end the war in just 3 days. And that was what was going around the media, too, that apparently 3 days was the time frame to completely annihilate Ukraine, take the whole place over, and that would be the end of it. But obviously, we found out very quickly afterward, about 3.5 years ago, that was not the case. And in fact, not only that, but Ukraine was going to mount a defense so good that they would end up attacking and invading Russia just a year or two later. So that backfired tremendously. A huge intelligence failure, or either just outright blatant lies, one or the other. I personally think that Putin knew the truth. He knew that Ukraine wasn't going to go away immediately, but he couldn't quite resist the urge to go back and try to reconstitute the empire. He had to start somewhere, so he started with Ukraine. It probably went much worse than he thought it was going to go, but I mean, this is a bad situation.
It's absolutely horrendous, and you would think, folks, that somebody who built up their reputation for decades as some sort of a master strategist and some sort of a magical wizard of forethought would not do something that's stupid, because it makes him look like an idiot, and he is an idiot. And I would be entirely honest with y'all, folks, Putin's been an idiot the entire time that he's ever been the president of Russia. If you look at any of the actions that he's made in any domestic policy in Russia, in foreign policy, they're absolutely bad moves every single time. There's never been one that's been good. And what's funny, folks, is that I'll be honest with you, Matthew. I don't really think Putin had been lied to by his generals. I think that they had spun the yarn on their propaganda so much that they even believed their own propaganda, because it had been going on for so long. They had kept this propaganda spin, folks, that Russia is the second best military in the world, second best to the United States, for about 25 years before they started their invasion of Ukraine. They had spun the yarn so much that everyone in the West thinks, and some people still in the West think, that the Russian Federation could steamroll NATO single-handedly. A compilation of the largest countries in the planet, a collective GDP amongst all of them, including the United States, of around $50 trillion, is going to get their ass handed to them by a country that has the GDP of just the state of Texas, which is about $2 trillion. The Russians actually have people believing that still, which is absolutely crazy how effective their propaganda was and how great they are. And so I would guess that Putin sat there and said to his generals, and his generals said to them, I mean, hell, our military is pretty much as effective as America's. Let's just send them into Ukraine and it'll be over in 3 days. And then they found out that that's certainly not going to be the case, because the Russian army is incompetent. It's quite stupid. And then on top of that, I guess they completely forgot that the Ukrainians hate them, because over the prior times in history, just over the past about 80 years, the Russians themselves conducted a load of genocides against the Ukrainian people while they were in the Soviet Union, and generally treated them like second-class citizens within their own territory. So there's no reason that the Ukrainians would want to be back under Russian control. They have an endless history over the past 80 years of being treated poorly by them.
I personally think that Putin just got tired of waiting because he started with the annexation of Crimea. And before that, before they had annexed Crimea, Ukraine was not properly looking at joining NATO. That's a huge misconception that people have. Ukraine was not seriously considering joining NATO before the Crimean annexation back in 2014, I believe it was. So when that happened, then Ukraine naturally was looking for defense, and they went to NATO and started trying to join at that point. Logically so, because they just got invaded by a foreign power, which was Russia. So they went to go join, and I think Putin simply got tired of waiting ever since the annexation took place, and it was in 2022 that he couldn't wait any longer, so he thought, to hell with it. I guess in his mind, he was thinking you only live once, so let's just invade and see what happens. And I think he knew that it wasn't going to be a 3-day situation. He probably thought it was going to be a few weeks or something like that, but he probably didn't envision it was going to be 4+ years. He probably didn't envision that.
No, he certainly didn't envision that one. That's for sure. And folks, that's something that people have to remember. That's a little bit important about the Russian Federation is that expecting anything good out of the Russian Federation in terms of foreign policy, grand strategy, or economic prowess is putting your hopes in a lost cause. They do not have any of that, and they never will. And Putin has generally even shown that at the very last moment, they don't even have strategic expertise, and they generally end up conducting stupid decisions. But with all that in mind, folks, it is time for us to move on out of the asides and on into Moscow, as we have heard. Crowning all of our attacks for the day, the Altesh unit, which is basically the combined partisan forces against the Russian Federation, which includes Russian partisans against the Russian government and Ukrainian partisans against the Russian government, we did get to see that they conducted an attack on the 5th Air Defense Division's communications tower. This is incredibly important for comms in the Moscow area, especially for the air defenses, and it appears that because of this attack, air defense response times may be reduced, at least within the specific sector, due to their lack of communication with the larger air defense grid, due to the damage that was caused to the electronic components that allow for transmissions of signals from this tower. You can see the fire burning right there after the partisans started it. With that in mind, it does appear that Russia's air defenses may be slightly reduced within one area, or in short, there's going to be a chink in the chain of Russia's chainmail around the Moscow area for its air defense. So probably not going to be ending up turning out too well for them, especially if the Ukrainians conduct a drone attack over the course of tonight, right now, that actually attempts to target the Moscow area. We may see that a couple of drones will be able to slip through that area, while most others will most likely still be shot down as usual. But still, a lot of people are talking about that partisan attack that happened in Moscow today, and the significance of it, considering that it's quite rare to actually see confirmed video evidence of such significant partisan attacks occurring on critical communication systems or infrastructure or command posts of the Russian Federation within the capital city. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that attack, and what are they thinking that's starting to show? And what are you thinking as well?
All right, so this was certainly a very bold attack today. The partisans literally pulled up to the Moscow region, which is obviously very close to the capital of Moscow. They launched an attack, an arson attack that is, on this communication site for an air defense battery. So that was a very bold attack, very close to Moscow. So that's a big shift. And what are your thoughts about this? Will the partisans get bolder or not? And it looks like 68% said partisans will become bolder, while 17% said the partisans are doing the usual and nothing will change, and 8% said it's basically pointless. It was only one communication site. So the big deal to me is it's more of a symbolic shift than anything, because of course destroying the communication site, that is important, but it is just one site. What this does indicate though is the partisans are operating freely inside of Russia, and launching an attack that close to Moscow, they are getting bolder with their attacks. So I would expect to see even bolder attacks than this in the future, in the coming weeks, if they're willing to do this so close to Moscow. So also a huge lapse in the FSB once again. It seems like the FSB is really slipping up here recently. But Enforcer, what say you?
You know, the last slip up that the FSB had was, "Dad, I'll give you $500,000 if you take out that dude who leaves the Russian Volunteer Corps." Okay, here's your 500 grand. Actually, we were the Ukrainians the whole time. We lied to you. Man, like, honestly.
Man, you gotta love it. Budanov left his position. He took the 500,000, said, "Here, Ukraine government, have this for our lead. This is my parting gift as I go to the presidential office."
Man, dude, the Ukrainians sat there and said, "Wait a minute, people in America say that we're scamming the U.S. government for money?
No, you're wrong. We're actually scamming Russia directly for the money. I mean, like, literally. We just came up with, like, a fake hit and everything. Like, no shit. Look at it. Google it. You know, it's like,
Man, I tell you what, Budanov's a man of many talents. One minute he's an intelligence master, the next minute he's scamming the Russians. You never can tell what he's going to bring next time.
You know, the biggest FSB failing of the whole war, though, a lot of y'all might remember this one, was Operation Spiderweb, where the Russian FSB didn't realize that right next to their regional headquarters within one of the oblasts, I believe it was near to the area of Yekaterinburg or Chelyabinsk, literally right across the street from the FSB headquarters in that city, the Ukrainians were running an entire operation to get ready to attack Russia's strategic bomber fleet, and they ended up knocking out a third of their bombers and completely destroying them in that attack. So, you know, kind of dropping the ball in general. I don't really expect a lot out of the FSB anymore, folks, but I would have to be with the 68%. The partisans are becoming bolder, and they will be becoming bolder as time continues to pass. So I would be with the 68% as well. I think that there's going to only be continued partisan attacks throughout the Russian Federation on other critical infrastructure and military systems. Moving on out of Russia, though, folks, it's time for us to finally move on from the attacks that were conducted in the Russian Federation and move our way on down and into the middle of the East, because we all know that this is the crossroads of the world, and for that reason, we call it the Thunderdome, because everybody here, everybody in the world comes here to settle their differences over who in the world controls the oil. Everybody loves oil, especially the United States of America. It's a near and dear resource to our hearts, and we absolutely love it. We just went and kidnapped the empanada-eating guy to go get their oil, and it makes us wonder, who in the world else is going to be taken away? Is the Wizard of Tehran going to be nabbed next so that way we can get a hold of their oil? Or are we going to start becoming more creative in our ways to secure oil? But before we get on into our treasure hunt or Easter egg hunt for oil eggs within the Middle East, I do want to make sure that we take a brief moment to say a humongous thanks to everyone who has been watching so far tonight. We have 15.6 thousand people here right now, and that's a lot of people. And we've actually gotten 80,000 views at this point. And I gotta say that we're entirely appreciative and massively thankful for all of y'all watching so far. And also, Matthew, I was wondering here, how far has the fundraiser come?
So right now, the fundraiser is sitting at just shy of $1,400 raised, and it is literally just $15 shy of it. So already $1,400 raised. We have a little ways to go, about a little over $1,000 to go before we hit the goal, but we are making steady progress though, and also had a lot of top donors tonight coming in as well. Also, we just had a 50 come in right then from actually Cliff H. They just brought us up to almost 1,400 actually.
And I gotta say, an absolutely incredible thing to hear, and it sounds as though the fundraiser, oh damn, Nicholas Condor just threw in a $500 donation. Holy
Nicholas Condor,
moly.
what in the world, man? He just flew in like a condor with that 500 and brought us right up to almost 1,800 raised. That's crazy work.
Dang! Now, folks, we are only $700 away from the fundraiser goal of $2.5 thousand, and I'm sure, folks, that we're going to be hitting that here quite soon. And also, Matthew, speaking of the folks like Nicholas Condor, who I think just threw in the largest donation of the night, who are some of our top donors for tonight's fundraiser?
All right, so of course, a big shout to Nicholas Condor for throwing in that $500 donation, the largest one of the night, by the way, extremely generous, and thank you very much, Nicholas, for that generosity. We also have a 116 from Dyer Guy, also the second largest of the night. Then we had a 100 from Espen Turgenhagen, as well as a 100 from Greg Carrier, as well as Hal Rose, and then a 50 from Brian Sodor, as well as a 50 from Rowdy Basswood, as well as Measure Man, Mark Ead, Luke UK, Old Warrior Fella, as well as Joseph Carr, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Cliff H. And so far, those are the top donors of the night, but I'm sure we will have many more to go as we hit that goal here, probably in the next 30 to 40 minutes, I would estimate. So a big shout to our top donors and everybody else that we were not able to call off as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say a humongous shout out to everyone who has been supporting the fundraiser tonight, because that is absolutely unbelievable support, and we have to congratulate and thank everyone so much once again for continuing to support these fundraisers 1,418 days into the show's running. Pretty much since the very first days that we were running this channel on daily news coverage, we have run a Sunday night fundraiser every single Sunday, meaning that at this point, if we were to average that out, we've run about, probably, if I had to take a guess, something like 180 fundraisers, I'd assume. There's about 51 weeks in a year, and we generally run a fundraiser every single Sunday of every year. There's been very few exceptions. I think maybe like one or two, or maybe even three at the most. So we've run approximately at this point, considering that's almost 4 years, at least about 180 fundraisers, most likely, which is an absolutely unbelievable number, and a really crazy thing to know that so many people are continuing to support these fundraisers after we've been running them for so long. And I have to give a massive shout out and thanks to everyone, both the top donors and the donors that we weren't able to call out, because each and every single one of y'all come together to make these fundraisers possible. If it wasn't for the smaller donations, half of the fundraiser amount wouldn't be here right now. And if it wasn't for the large donations, half of the fundraiser amount also would not be here at the moment. So I gotta say, humongous thanks and a huge appreciation to everyone who's continuing to support these fundraisers, as they do a massive amount of help for the nonprofits that are working hard in Ukraine to save lives and keep people out of harm's way. So humongous thanks to y'all once again. And also, Matthew, let's get 3 questions from the chat before we move on as well. So what do we got?
Also, by the way, real quick announcement. Tonight, since it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream, typically we do not have super chats. We may have a handful here and there, of course, because I think there is an option to do that. But typically we answer just the live chat questions tonight. So if you have a question for us, tag at It's Enforcer Matt in the live chat and put your question behind it, and I'll add it to our spreadsheet, and we'll try to answer as many as possible near the end of the stream. But jumping into our first one, we do have a question from One Visual, who said, who will be the country to start the next big conflict?
Ooh, that's a good question. And it's really hard to say because there's a lot of them that we're watching right now, and there's a lot of them that could start soon. I'm going to have to say off the front, though, one thing I can guarantee you it's not going to be starting next would be China and Taiwan. That's still probably about a year out from now. Maybe even a year and a half or two. So that won't be happening anytime soon. But the Thailand-Cambodia war, which although the Cambodians did attack the Thai, we haven't really seen the war start up yet, at least from what we've seen. So that is probably highly likely to be starting soon. The Thai are probably just drawing up more military actions to conduct against the Cambodians. So I would say that's a high likelihood of being a candidate for the next war that will restart. Pakistan and India are also a war that's basically been put on hold for a little while and will restart again here within the near future. So I would say that that's probably going to be a pretty decently likely one to see happen this year, considering that both sides are continuously saying that war is on the horizon and is going to be happening at some point. Both sides are. So considering that both of them seem to be raring to go, it's highly likely that's going to be happening. Afghanistan and Pakistan is also a likely one to happen as well, because they actually have incredibly bad relations with each other, and so they could end up going to war with each other. Israel and Iran is highly likely as well within the very near future. That could also pop off again. And generally, the Yemeni civil war is ongoing at the moment, so that one's not even one in the consideration. And then there is, at the moment right now, the U.S. war on Denmark with the annexation of Greenland, which I would hope doesn't happen, but could be in the possibility. And then also now a U.S. threat of war on Cuba. And I have no clue if that would even be followed through on or what would happen with that. So those are all the wars that we kind of have right now in the oven that are being baked at the moment and getting ready to be kind of put on air when they start to happen. So really any one of those could be the next war to happen. And it's really hard to say which, because it kind of just depends on the national leadership in these countries, their military capabilities, or if some sort of an external event or internal event happens that then accelerates that into a full-blown war earlier than we would expect. So really any one of those could be the next war right now. So I hope that answers your question well. And with that, we are on into the next one.
And our next one is actually a super chat. It's a $50 super chat from Old Texas Red. And thank you very much, Old Texas, for that support. And we do appreciate that generous super chat, even on the Sunday night fundraiser stream. And we do appreciate that. He said, I hate to correct y'all, but Russia's had at least 4 revolutions. The first was in the 19th century. It failed, and there's a movie. And the second was after the Russo-Japanese War, which failed. And the third attempt ended the Tsar. And the fourth brought in the Bolsheviks.
And I thank you for the support. And that is actually true, Old Texas Red. You are correct with that. There was the 1905 revolution, which happened generally, from what I would know, in St. Petersburg, and I believe also in Moscow as well. There was also the one in the 19th century, which I don't really know a whole deal about, but I do know that it did happen. I believe that was the one that happened in the Urals, but that was more so like a peasant revolt, and that was kind of put down. It didn't really affect the central government all too much, if I'm remembering that one correctly. And then there was the third attempt, which was the 1917 revolution, and then I would say that the Bolshevik revolution wasn't necessarily a revolution, because Lenin basically just rolled up into St. Petersburg and then completely flipped the government from the let's see what we would call them. We would call them generally the socialists, and then he flipped it into the Bolshevik Party, which was his, and then he called the majority party, which was the actual socialists and communists, the minority party, although his party was smaller than theirs, at least in terms of followership and membership numbers. But that is true, that is correct, and I would actually have to say, I've got to give an open clarification on air, but also at the same time, though, in defense of what I was saying earlier, generally the 1905 revolution, the 1917 revolution, and then the Bolshevik revolution, which overthrew the communists that had created the provisional government, those generally kind of were all one larger overarching time of instability, kind of like we would say in Iran right now, because right now the revolution in Iran could be put down by the Iranian government, but with how many people they've killed and how much animosity they're going to create out of their crackdown on this revolution that's happening in Iran, this is going to resurge again in the future. And generally, if I was the one who was historically arguing whether it was or wasn't two separate revolutions or just one large revolution, I'd actually say that it was just one large revolution. Because the moving theme in Russia in the 1905 revolution, the 1917 revolution, and the Bolshevik revolution was generally an attempt to overthrow the czarist government and to see that a more equal government was brought into place that didn't exploit the peasantry. So I would say generally they're all sort of one large overarching revolution, but you do have a point. There actually were several revolutions that were a part of that. But I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and helping this channel to be a reality, even on the midst of a Sunday night fundraiser. YouTube is not supposed to allow us to take in donations, at least how it used to. Well, super chats, at least that's how it used to be. But nowadays, for some reason, and it's been like this, I think, for about a whole year now, they allow people to throw in super chats on Sundays. We got to thank you all massively, though, for the folks who do support us, even on a Sunday. We never expect that, and generally we're not supposed to take those, but we also can't refund them, and we can't stop them either. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that incredibly well, and we're on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the news of the Middle East.
All right, so this one goes to GW, who said, with the seizure of all these tankers, these oil tankers by the United States, how much do you suspect that the U.S. is doing it to help Ukraine? And honestly, GW, yeah, that's a very good point right there. I think partially is because the U.S. wants to actually take the oil back from Venezuela and basically use it for ourselves. That is part of the reason. So part of it is kind of a selfish reason, but we just heard today as well that allegedly the CIA was helping Ukraine target these Russian ships in the Black Sea and other areas before they even started seizing these other oil tankers near Venezuela that have Russian ties. So part of it is the U.S. giving Ukraine the green light to do damage to Russia's economy with their oil trade, but also there's still a selfish element to it as well for the United States. So I would say partial. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that's partially the case as well. I would generally have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that. It benefits the Ukrainians, but I don't believe that's the direct reason why it's being done. I think it's more so being done so that way the United States can kind of flex its muscles on the whole Venezuela situation. Because if you'll notice, both Russian shadow tankers that have been seized were both either trying to make it into Venezuela, or they were attempting to leave Venezuela, or they were near Venezuela's waters. It was one of those three sorts of scenarios. So while it is helping out Ukraine, at least in reducing Russia's oil carrying capacity, I don't think it was necessarily done for Ukraine's benefit primarily. I think that's more so an unintentional side effect of the actions, more so than a direct result of U.S. policymaking and decision-making within the area. Because even right now, while the U.S. administration is apparently saying in some metric somewhere that they're tired of Putin and he's generally the one stopping the war from ending. On the other hand, the president's also saying that Putin really does want peace, although he fired an IRBM at Lviv just 2 days ago. So it really makes you wonder.
Is he really saying that? Is he really still saying that? Because I didn't hear him say that recently.
Well, I mean, it was literally the day after that Oreshnik IRBM was fired. He said, I really think he wants peace. And I was like, come on, man. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Like,
I'm not sure you can say that really, because it's like that Russia just said that the 20-point peace plan that was literally authored by the U.S. administration and also worked out with Zelensky, the Russians called that thing an axis of war. So they're not even willing to apparently look at it fairly. They're simply calling it a terrible document, and they're not even willing to work with it.
Yeah, it's stupid. Like, it's so dumb. Like at this point, folks, the Russians could go into Estonia and literally wipe out everyone alive in the capital of Estonia, and the president would still say that they probably want peace, probably, at this point. I mean, it's insane the amount of denial of logic that's being made at this point about the Russian position, considering that that's what they're doing. And someone just said he's being diplomatic. He was being diplomatic the first 3 times, but this is like the 20th time now. So there's only so many times you can be diplomatic. I mean, if you walk into someone's house and, you spit on their carpet, you shit on their bed. I mean, some people actually do that in real life.
Damn.
And then you go and you like punt their dog through their yard and then you burn down their house. There's only so many times you can be diplomatic about someone's rude behavior at your place before you tell them to leave or you start beating the hell out of them for what they're doing, one or the other. So, I mean, yeah, you can make the argument he was being diplomatic the first 2 or 3 times, which we did do on this channel back in early 2025, but it's 2026 now, and this has probably happened for like the 20th time. It's hard to even keep count of how many times this has been done, and he's still saying it, so it's not even being diplomatic at this point, it's just being stupid. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, folks, it is time for us to move on out of that question, and on up into the Middle East, because we do have a lot of news coming out of the Middle East over the course of the day, and we cannot miss out on that news, folks. We've got to get into it, and we've got to cover all of the major developments that have been happening within the area. So moving us on down and directly into the Islamic Republic of Iran, many of y'all will notice that we have practically no red markers spread out throughout the country today. The red markers indicate a Sunday, or day 4 of the week. And we have literally none of them. And that is because it has been incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to get any video or picture evidence out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, except for in very limited numbers. So most of the news that we've gotten out of Iran today is not in video and picture evidence. It's basically in statements that have been made on the ground, either by government officials or people involved in the protests and the revolution. One or the other. So we're going to be moving on into Tehran, and we're going to show you all the very seldom amounts of clips that we got out of Tehran today, barring the ones that show the active massacre happening and the large amount of bodies in the streets. And then we'll be moving on up into all of the governmental news and statements from the ground that we've gotten across the country throughout the day. Moving us on into our actual confirmed video evidence on the ground, we did get to see the continued protests going on in Tehran. This was several hours ago, about 6 hours ago at this point, and here is the clip.
That's impressive that they're still out there after all this time because, with all the reports of the massacres going on, I mean, any other folks might go to their house and go call it a day, but they're not finished yet. They're still out there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how people are still out there at this moment. We also got a rough approximation at the moment of a jamming map that's going on in Tehran, of places where footage is being transmitted and also places where it appears there is no transmission abilities. And we understand that the Islamic Republic of Iran is apparently attempting to try and jam and completely disrupt the internet connectivity, even of Starlink connections, somehow, to be able to stop any video uploading happening on the internet of what's going on inside the country, or at least heavily stymie the uploads of videos. We also were able to see a video of some of the Iranian protesters in a mosque, completely ignoring that at the beginning of that video right there. But here's the clip of them inside of a mosque today within Tehran as well. We see them walking on in, and it looks like they're starting to trash the place. They just threw some pot up at a chandelier. We also see something falling from the roof.
That's kind of interesting that they're choosing to trash a mosque because, to my knowledge, I believe these individuals here are probably also of the same religion. So that's kind of interesting they chose to do that.
It is fairly interesting, but I think they're doing it because religion inside of Iran is directly connected to the government. So showing any sort of dissent against, say, a Shiite mosque is most likely showing some sort of resentment against the actual government itself, considering that Iran is a theocracy.
Yeah, and also it looks like this guy here with the pole is trying to take down
a
speaker, or yes, maybe a speaker. I thought it was a security camera for a second, but it looks like he's trying to take the speakers down.
Man, and people thought looting only happened in the U.S., like in the U.S. protests and riots. Well, it looks like in Iran they do more than that.
Also, by the way, I am aware that there are Christians inside of Iran, but obviously that's not a welcome thing inside of Iran because the government does not really like that much. But I am aware that they are there. Oh, look, and this also was a security camera right here. I thought this was like somebody filming it for a second.
I gotta say, that was kind of wild to see. The guy started smacking down the camera. I was like, wow. I was like, that's kind of a wild thing to see. But it looks as though they are just irate at basically anything that would be affiliated with the Iranian government at this point. So a little bit interesting with that, generally showing us they've had enough of everything. Moving on from that, it's time for us to get on into the official government statements that have come out over the course of the day, and also the eyewitness statements on the ground as a whole. Apparently, we have been able to hear that funerals have been arranged for those who have been killed so far in the protest by the government, and the regime-organized funeral ceremonies have reportedly backfired, according to Iran Wire, as relatives and mourners began chanting "Death to Khomeini" in the midst of the state-managed funerals. So apparently, even funerals are now becoming a point of an outlet for people to vent against the Iranian government and to demand the death of the supreme leader of the country. We have also been able to hear that there has been significant reports of jamming happening within the Islamic Republic of Iran, and there's been a huge amount of people who are saying that it's not happening because Starlink's basically unjammable, and other people who are saying that it's happened because we are hardly getting any video and picture evidence out of the country. And I would have to generally lean, folks, towards the idea that there is a high likelihood that Starlink is being heavily jammed. We are not getting hardly any video and picture evidence out of the country, which leads us to believe that the Starlink connectivity of yesterday does not exist today. That's how we were getting most of our footage 24 hours ago, and now in the present day right now, we are getting basically no footage out of the country, even from Starlink. And these people didn't stop uploading videos, it's just that they cannot upload the videos. So we do believe that there is active jamming going on in Iran at the moment. We also have been able to hear, additionally, and I want to make sure that we get this right here to move us on into this poll, that according to eyewitnesses to the BBC World Service, they've estimated that over 10,000 people have been killed so far in these active protests and revolutions, describing that some form of an AK-type rifle being used, and security services are lining up and shooting unarmed protesters, and bodies are being piled up, apparently like sandbags, or described by the locals as rice bags. BBC News has not been able to verify these claims, but we have been able to hear that the death toll is certainly within the thousands as of today. We don't know if it's 10,000, but many estimates, even the ones that are far more conservative than this, have put the death toll around 3,000 to 4,000 people over the past few days since the government started to fire directly onto the revolutionaries and the protesters. We've even been able to hear as well, outside of that, that apparently the Iranian government has also lost 109 personnel as well, and that's even according to Iranian state media, meaning that this number may be downplayed and that the number may be higher. Possibly several hundred security personnel have been killed in the ongoing revolutions and protests throughout the country, meaning that losses are beginning to amount on both sides, but losses are certainly mounting for the revolutionaries at this point far faster than those of the security personnel. This has led a lot of people to wonder whether these reports are even factually accurate or not, considering that there is a lot of video and picture evidence coming out of bodies being piled up, no joke, inside of gymnasiums, outside of hospitals, and elsewhere for people to come by and try and identify the bodies. It seems as though it's probably more so accurate than not that major casualties and fatalities have been seen within the country due to these ongoing revolutions. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So unfortunately, I can attest myself. I have personally been watching video after video coming out of Iran that we cannot show here on the stream. And I've not even reposted these on Twitter, by the way. I've literally just bookmarked them and leave them to the side because it's very graphic. And some of these don't have graphic warnings on them. So you might unintentionally scroll across it and then be exposed to something horrific. So I haven't reposted it. But I can tell you the gymnasiums I'm seeing here are full of body bags. Unfortunately, some of these casualties don't even get body bags. They just literally pile them up on the side of the street, and it's a lot of people. Like, it is a lot. I think it's more than we're being told about. And also, we can only get so much information because, of course, there's a lot of jamming going on as well. So we can't get a whole bunch of information, but at least based on some eyewitness testimony, they're claiming that over 10,000 people have been massacred by the Iranian government, which is obviously more than reported. So what are your thoughts? 39% said, I believe it's probably right, while 31% said, I don't believe it's that high, and 19% said, I'm 50-50 on that claim. So, unfortunately, I am with 39%. I believe that number could be close to being accurate. Obviously, it's not an exact number because it's an eyewitness claim, and they're probably just guesstimating, but the fact that eyewitnesses believe that 10,000 people have been massacred, that's not good, and also seems to back up the videos I'm seeing as well. So I'd also heard reports that apparently they're not discriminating about who they're shooting at. There was a 50-year-old male who I heard about just about, probably about 10 or 15 minutes before I went on the air, that was apparently shot in the back 3 times by a Kalashnikov from one of these soldiers. And obviously, shooting somebody in the back, that's a whole different thing. The guy was probably trying to run away when he was getting shot at. So that's obviously indicating it's probably an ongoing massacre that we're seeing right now. So it's not a good situation. It's really ugly right now. And I think my hunch is this situation might be turning back to the government because of the utmost brutality that they're using on the civilians. The government might be regaining some traction. So that's not a good sign. It might indicate that even though we had previously said that we didn't think the U.S. should get involved, it might be necessary for the U.S. to jump in, or otherwise this could go a different direction. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 19%. I'm generally 50-50 on that claim, and I'd actually have to say that based off of the amalgamations of reports that we've gotten over the day, it's an incredibly wide ballpark of fatalities that could be reported out of the country, but it is definitely somewhere in between 4,000 to 10,000 people. We're not really sure, or at least I'm not really sure, where that exactly falls within that number, but it's somewhere in between 4,000 to 10,000 people have been killed so far by the Iranian government. Because 10,000 is probably the most liberal estimate that we've seen over the day of the amount of fatalities inside the country, but the more conservative estimates at this point are generally putting that number around 3,000 to 4,000. And I would generally assume that it would probably be on the higher end of that, around 4,000. So if we took all of the reports over the course of the day and we meshed them together, it is approximately somewhere between 4,000 to 10,000 people. Whether it's 10,000 or whether it's 4,000, that is an insanely large amount of people who have been killed, really just within the past 4 days. At this point right now, in terms of fatalities inside of Iran, the Iranian citizens are dying at a faster rate than Russian soldiers are dying in the war in Ukraine. Because when we go over our casualty reports and we say that 1,013 or so Russian soldiers have been wounded or killed, that means that generally, out of that number, about 300 or 400 Russian soldiers have been killed, and the other 600 or 700 were wounded to some significant degree that's put them out of action. In Iran, they're dying about 1,000 a day, even at the lowest estimate, which would be about 3,000 to 4,000 people. At the highest estimate, which is about 10,000 people, actually around 2,000 Iranian civilians are dying every day, which means that they're far outpacing the amount of deaths that even the Russian army is facing in Ukraine at this point on about a 1,200-mile-long active front line in a full-scale conventional war, meaning that the brutality that we're hearing of inside of Iran is on a scale that we have truly never seen at this point within the 21st century. I would have to say that because of this, I do think that there needs to be some consideration given to possible U.S. support for the revolution. If the Iranian government is dealing with these civilians in such a brutal form that they're dying in at least a minimum of 1,000 people a day at this point across the entirety of the country, the government is most likely going to put down this revolution by sheer violence alone. And for that reason, I think that we could definitely make in the United States of America a significant argument on the grounds of humanitarian reasons to actually start a military intervention in Iran in support of the revolution. The optics of that is not really the greatest, at least in terms of foreign policy and how a lot of countries and maybe even people inside of Iran will look at that. But at the same time, it's either that or we see that these massacres continue, and we also will continue to see that the Iranian government will survive well on into the future several years later until another revolution like this begins and the government is actually overthrown. And I would say that it'd be far better for the people on the ground in Iran and also for the United States for strategic reasons that this revolution is seen through to success, whether or not the Iranian people or the international community would be incredibly on board with that idea or not, at least for now. So I would say that might be what's needed at this moment. We said, folks, at the beginning to take a tempo and a read of the situation and see how good or bad this is going to be going. And considering that this now sounds to be going into a bloodbath, I think the U.S. military intervention could certainly be argued and supported at this point.
Yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, while I still believe it'd be best if the U.S. did not get involved if all possible, at the end of the day, though, the U.S. objective here is to make sure the Iranian regime falls. So if it looks like the government is regaining control by simply massacring people and is starting to sway back toward the government's advantage, then that makes the strikes almost imperative at that point, because we don't want to let the protesters lose momentum and start getting slaughtered like crazy, because, obviously then the Ayatollah might be able to keep power, which is not what we want. So I think strikes at this point might need to be strongly considered. And I think they're going to happen anyway. But I think the big question is it going to come too late or is it going to come right at the right time? And right now we're not totally sure when the strike's going to happen.
And I got to tell you, folks, that we're about to be getting into that news right now, and it's looking very questionable at the moment, at least from what we're hearing. And moving us on into that, we've actually got a lot of news on that over the course of the day. We have been able to hear that the President of the United States has made a statement that apparently there is going to be some sort of help given to the Iranian citizens. I didn't put that direct link into our map, but that statement was made today on Truth Social. And then additionally, we were able to hear that the President is going to be briefed on Tuesday on the options to respond to the protests in Iran. This meeting will include the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense. So at the moment, it appears that a decision, even at all, to be made on what we're going to do is going to be made on Tuesday, meaning that we do not have any ability to make a decision right now, because the President of the United States, in most normal capacities, would wait to speak to their advisors on a situation to see how they're going to respond, meaning that at a minimum, it's going to be 48 hours from now before we even see a semblance of an answer or a plan made by the U.S. government to even respond to this. And considering that the President of the United States doesn't make any long-term plans, even after that decision's made on Tuesday, we'll still have to take it day by day. On top of that, we also understand that, at least at the moment, according to other U.S. officials, they state that the current administration isn't expected to send American forces into Iran, and no major troop or asset movements are currently planned in the CENTCOM. So, at the moment, we don't even see that there is a large amount of forces, except for stratotankers, within the Middle East right now. So, we don't know what's there, but it's an incredibly limited number of stuff. And also to let y'all know, the CENTCOM does not keep a large amount of forces available in their area of responsibility on a permanent basis. They have, I believe, something around 4 brigades within the area, which is not an incredibly large unit at all. That's basically a divisional level unit. And just to give you all a comparable example here, within Europe, we have 2 full divisions. As a matter of fact, we have an entire corps and then an entire army with additional supporting elements added to that in Europe alone. So we have basically nothing to work with inside the Middle East right now in terms of ground forces or air forces. We would have to see that those forces would have to be moved into theater to conduct anything against Iran. And it doesn't appear that that's happening right now. And if that does happen, that's going to happen starting on Tuesday at a minimum, if it happens at all. So while the United States government has made a great deal of statements that help us on the way for the Iranian people, it generally appears that those statements were made without any real follow through at all at this moment. We've seen no force deployment. And it also appears that any decision made in support of the Iranian Revolution is going to have to wait for about another 2 days at this moment. Additionally, there's also been a heavy argument right now about when the world's going to be going on as far as U.S. strike capabilities. There's actually been a very contentious argument online about what type of force elements would be necessary for the U.S. Armed Forces to conduct a successful operation against Iran. And one of the main points of contention in that argument has been whether or not the United States requires a carrier strike group in the area to be able to conduct actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And there is a decent amount of a reason why there should be one. But before we get into the whole strategic analysis of that, and I start skewing people's opinions on this by laying out a whole bunch of information on it, Matthew, what are people actually thinking about the necessity of a U.S. carrier being in the area? Do they think that that's a basic requirement, or do they think that that's not really necessary?
Okay, so I was debating this right here on Twitter all day long. In fact, it's almost consumed my day at this point. Now, I rarely ever let Twitter arguments consume my day, but this one kind of did. And I was arguing with a couple of people that are editors at some of these major war newspapers and also magazines about this situation. So here's the question. Some claim that a U.S. aircraft carrier presence is not needed for strikes against Iran, but would you agree with that? 42% said yes, an aircraft carrier is needed, while 26% said no, an aircraft carrier is not needed, and 22% said it's simply an added bonus, but it's not totally necessary. So I would say I'm with the 43%. I believe an aircraft carrier is needed, and also historically, we have always had an aircraft carrier presence when we strike Iran. I think one of the few exceptions might have been when we did the B-2 bomber strikes on the nuclear sites. I think that might have been one exception, but I can't recall that for a certainty. But I would say we need an aircraft carrier because not necessarily for offensive reasons do we need it. We need it for defensive reasons, because once the Iranians retaliate and they start firing loads and loads of missiles at our U.S. bases and Israel, we have to have enough forces in the air to shoot those missiles down. And without the aircraft carrier, you are a lot of aircraft short at that point for defense. So solely for defensive reasons, I would say an aircraft carrier is a prerequisite to strikes with fighter jets inside of Iran. So I'm with the 44%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm also with the 44% as well. And there's some people who say that an aircraft carrier is not necessary to conduct strikes on Iran. And technically that's correct. But there's a large reason why an aircraft carrier should be present within the area. An aircraft carrier is an aircraft carrier strike group. There is no such thing as an aircraft carrier venturing solo into the greater ocean. That does not happen. That's basically asking for someone to obliterate it. An aircraft carrier has somewhat limited defensive capabilities, especially compared to other vessels of the fleet, and for that reason, a carrier is always accompanied by several destroyers or even a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, or several Ticonderoga-class cruisers, depending on what is attached to their carrier strike group. This means that an aircraft carrier strike group is not only an offensive force with its aircraft on board the ship, but it also is an incredibly well-armed defensive force against possible fire that could be directed by the Islamic Republic of Iran against U.S. forces in the region, and also our allies within the area, primarily the Israelis, which have already been directly threatened by the Iranians that they will conduct strikes on U.S. and Israeli forces in the region if the United States attacks. They might even conduct a preemptive attack. This is something that's incredibly important to remember, that destroyers, in the modern sense, or guided missile destroyers, they are generally giant air defense platforms. Like, for example, let me go get you all the early Burke here, because this is something that I think is the most important reason to have a carrier in the area. This is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and what this basically is a giant rolling Patriot air defense battery, or a sailing Patriot air defense battery. It's even better than one, that just can wander around basically anywhere in the world as long as there is an ocean or some form of a body of water. The carrier strike group usually at a minimum has at least 4 of these, and they are able to carry a humongous amount of some of the most advanced air defense missiles that we have, which are the SM-3s. This is something that is incredibly important to have in the area if we were to conduct an attack. Not for the offensive capabilities of the aircraft carrier, that's just really more so icing on the cake. You could bring in all the air assets you want as a part of the U.S. Air Force to be able to conduct airstrikes on Iran. But the aircraft carrier is something that is extremely important, because if Iran tries to conduct an overwhelming missile attack against a carrier strike group, chances are very high it's going to be able to shoot down most incoming missiles. Whether they're anti-ship missiles or any other form of missile, they have enough missile defense in the carrier strike group to be able to basically deal and eliminate any threat on the spot. And then they also have the counterattack capabilities on board the aircraft carrier to be able to dispatch and destroy any air defense or anti-ship systems that fired at the carrier strike group or the aircraft of the carrier strike group. Meaning that a carrier strike group is a complete package, offensively and defensively. Not only that, all of its logistical capabilities are operated via the Navy, meaning that we do not have to count on air corridors remaining open into Middle Eastern countries to operate a carrier strike group, as it can simply sail out of the area into the Indian Ocean and be replenished underway by U.S. tenders, and then sail right back into the area and continue on military operations like nothing's happened. Another thing that's incredibly important to remember, once again getting back to the most important point that I was mentioning, these are air defense forces, and a huge amount of them. If we have 4 Arleigh Burkes with that carrier, that means that carrier has about 400 air defense missiles to work with. That's 400 Iranian missiles that can be shot down. And without that carrier strike group present, and with basically no destroyers present as standalone forces within that area right now, we have basically no air defense. Sure, we can move in a couple of THAADs and we can move in Patriots, but that is only the building block of a large amount of building blocks that we need to make sure that we can deal with overwhelming firepower that the Iranians are going to be flinging everyone's way once they start to launch their attacks.
Yeah, and that's what people are forgetting. The Iranians literally said, they stated it out of their own statement yesterday, that they are not going to just strike Israel if this thing starts popping off and the U.S. strikes Iran. They're going to be specifically targeting every single U.S. base in the region that they have access to. So they're going to be trying to hit our guys. They're going to be trying to hit Israel. So we have seen the U.S. and our coalition forces with Britain and other countries, we have the ability to strike offensively. We did that inside of Syria with our fighter jets. But when it comes to defense, because obviously Syria really can't fight back, or ISIS can't, but Iran, on the other hand, they have weapons to fire back at us, so we have to be ready for that. And they're going to be firing them at so many different targets. You got to have a lot of air assets up and ready to go to shoot that stuff down, because Israel, we saw the other time, their Iron Dome got overwhelmed. So if the worst case scenario happens and we have every single U.S. base getting targeted by missiles, you got to take care of that. And you've also got to be able to go help Israel out in case they start getting overwhelmed, which likely they might, depending on how many drones or missiles are launched. So it could be a huge disaster if we don't have the proper defenses in the region, most likely an aircraft carrier strike group. That could be a huge strategic mistake.
It would be a massive one. And I also saw someone say, well, don't we have air defenses in the area? Yes, but that's not sufficient. It's fine to have air defense, but there's a huge difference between having 2 Patriot air defense batteries at Al Adid and then having 500 or 600 interceptors available at any given moment. There's a huge difference between that. The 2 Patriot batteries maybe have, at best, 40 interceptors available at that given moment. So that means if Iran fires anything more than 40 missiles at a single time, everyone in Qatar is screwed. They're dead, basically. They're just waiting for the Iranian missiles to hit. They can shoot down as many of them as they can, and they can try and mitigate the amount of people who are going to die, but people are going to die. That's something that you don't want. When we engage anyone in the world, we want to have overwhelming superiority, especially on the defensive level. We do not want, it's great to have a strong offense, but if we have no way to shoot down incoming Iranian missiles, our offensive capabilities are going to start crumbling pretty quickly. It's better to have humongous defensive capabilities and very little offensive capabilities, especially at the beginning of a conflict, because you do not want to see that all of your forces and resources in the area are destroyed outright before you can even start building an offensive force in the region. And that's why it's incredibly important, if we're to start military operations against Iran, that we move significant naval assets into the area, including a carrier strike group, considering that they will be able to provide the massive amounts of air cover and protection that we would need at a moment's notice if the Iranians start to fire mass volleys of missiles. At the beginning of the 12-day war, they were firing 80 missiles at a time. That is humongous numbers of missiles that have to be shot down. That requires all of our ground air defense forces to be at work. That requires all of our air forces to be at work shooting down those missiles. And it also requires all of our forces available in the Navy to be able to shoot down those missiles. It basically requires all of our combined arms and their air defensive capabilities to deal with and shoot down all of the Iranian missiles and drones that are going to be fired at a single moment. And then it's also going to require coalition allies in the area as well. It's going to require the whole Saudi Air Force, the whole Jordanian Air Force, and the whole Israeli Air Force, along with our ground air defense forces, just like last time, to be able to shoot down and stop these missiles and drones before they start reaching their targets. So I don't know why in the world anyone would argue we don't really need an aircraft carrier in the area, or we really don't need the Navy in the area, because that is the most important defensive capability we have in the air, is the missiles on board those ships in the Navy. So they definitely do need to be in the area, in my opinion.
I think it's just cockiness, honestly. I think some people get too cocky with it. They think that, oh, the U.S. has good firepower. We have high-tech advanced jets. We can go in and wipe the Iranian targets out and be done with it. But it's like, they can still fire missiles. We can't take everything out all at once. That would be such a huge, massive air operation. We don't have enough in the region for that. So, I mean, we can't get too cocky. It is better, like you're saying, to have overwhelming defenses and overwhelming offensive capabilities all the way around than to go in half-cocked and then end up screwing the whole thing up. Then a whole bunch of people end up getting killed because of the incompetence.
Yeah, and also another thing is that U.S. military planning has never worked off of, I don't think they can do that. And then we just completely drop any sort of extigent planning or contingency planning. There's always contingency planning involved. We always go into a conflict, folks, with the mindset of these people might actually be able to wipe us out completely. So we need everything in the area to where that can't even be a doubt. For example, we don't sit there and go, we could deal with the Iranian missiles before they're launched. What if we can? What if we're wrong? Well, we have 70 missiles in the air right now and about 400 Shaheds flying over the Middle East right now, and we have no way to shoot them down now. So whatever they hit, those people are dying on the receiving end. That's not really a position that you want to be in, because that's how you end up looking like a straight up fool, and that's also how you end up getting our folks killed. You always want to go, maybe we can't take out all their missile launchers, and what if we can? Well, we need to have enough air defense in the area to shoot all of that down so that way it doesn't pose a threat to our service members and our strategic positioning in the area by obliterating everything before we can even get a full-scale offensive going. So that's what I would generally say. Also, someone said, oh, so now we're weak? Are you stupid? Like, are you dumb?
Man,
no, we're
come
not.
on, man. What the hell? Who the hell said that? Why did they say that?
Look
That's
at that.
stupid, man.
So now we're weak. So if do you not understand you don't sit there and make this a fair fight. This is why stupid people aren't involved in strategy. You don't sit there and make it a fair fight. We're not trying to sit there and give the Iranians an open window like this is a damn movie, so that way they can cut off the head of the president and then destroy the whole military. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure they have no chance at all of pulling a fast one on us in any way. We're trying to stop that outright. So we're not trying to sit there and go, oh, we're weak. We're trying to go, no, we want to make sure that we're strong enough in that area. They can't do a damn thing. That's what we want to do, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know what
And
the
also,
hell.
and also, by the way, it's like, for example, look at the Venezuela operation to capture Maduro. Do you see how much effort they went through? Like, the military they prep like crazy. They over prepare because they know that you cannot screw things up when people's lives are on the line. That's why they over prepare. They built mock-ups of Venezuela's presidential palace. They went through rehearsals for months and months and months, planning every single thing out by what exact weapons they were going to use, what exact operators, helicopters they were going to use. It was a huge operation. Did they need to go through that much detail to make it happen? Probably not, but they knew they could not screw it up or otherwise people might die. So they had to over prepare for it. So same thing with Iran. You don't want to go in there and risk a bad outcome because real people's lives are on the lines here. You can't half-ass it.
Yeah, also someone said, so U.S. waits a week for a carrier group and 50,000 people die. Well, if that's what it takes, I mean, I'm just going to put it up front to you this way. If it's in between 50,000 revolutionaries, if that's your hypothetical, dying on the ground versus all of the U.S. forces that are in the region with no defensive capabilities right now getting blown up. So let's say 80 fighter aircraft that each cost several tens of millions of dollars apiece, along with hundreds of U.S. service members. Yeah, I'm generally going to lean more towards the side of caution in that regard than just going, let's get all of our service members killed and get a whole bunch of our aircraft wiped out on the ground before they could even take off, because it would be better to completely screw ourselves over and the Iranian revolutionaries instead of waiting until we're ready. That's how you end up getting a lot of people killed and you don't even end up achieving anything. That's how you end up letting the Iranians get a quick victory in the area, to where a lot of people in the U.S. would be bitter about ever conducting an action against Iran again because the last time we lost. And then also that's how you get the revolutionaries killed on the ground as well, because then you're giving them all the justification at that point to go, we destroyed the Americans, now we can go ham on these people. We can even hunt them down if they try and run and hide back to their house and just take them out in the street and have them shot on the spot because they rose up against the government. That's how you get a lot of people screwed over instead of sitting there and waiting to prepare properly. I gotta say, some people have some bad takes, folks. Like, I'm not trying to put people down on that, but like, to the few people who are saying stuff like, oh, so now the U.S. is weak, or, oh, so wait, we're going to sit there and wait until we're ready. I mean, I don't really know what some people are getting at there. I think that's why, you know, y'all might be more so just sitting here on the sidelines and kind of just saying stuff more so than being involved in it, because anyone who would be involved in actually getting shot at would kind of let you know they would like to be as well protected as possible defensively before you do something that might get all of the U.S. service members in the region wounded or killed. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we did get out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as we have also been able to hear that apparently the Iranians have claimed that they shut down Starlink. So that's what they're claiming at the moment right now. That's also what Forbes is claiming, as it does appear that some sort of jamming systems were involved that were able to shut down most of the upload capabilities of the Starlink systems in the country. Additionally, we have also been able to hear that the Iranian government is now calling forward for pro-Iranian government citizens to demonstrate at 2 p.m. tomorrow on Monday to try and support the supreme leader, who is Khamenei. And also,
that was what they came out and said, because you remember the president of Iran was supposed to come out and speak. I think it was today at some point. Is that what he was telling people to go do?
Yeah, that's what he was telling them to do.
Oh, geez, that's stupid right there. It's like, also, I doubt that many people are going to show up, and we probably won't be able to even get to see how many people showed up, because we can't even get the footage out of the place because they're jamming everything. It sounds to me, if I had to take a guess at what they're really trying to do here, is that they're trying to come up with a reason, so that way they can somehow explain mass casualties by trying to say that these pro-government protesters showed up and they started fighting with the other people. That could be what they're trying to do, is create a cover for a massacre, perhaps.
Maybe. And also, apparently, they're asking participants to bring a Quran in response to the desecration by pro-Shah supporters. I gotta say, folks, the Iranian government makes the heaviest argument why religion and politics should not mix, because that's just goofy. Like, let's bring out the book, and that's really going to make things better. It's like, well, the revolution's still going to be going on. It's like bringing out the Quran isn't like, holy water to a vampire or something like that. It's like, it's not really going to do anything rather than they brought a book with them. So, that's a little interesting. Anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to hear that the Iranians sent another letter to the United Nations and whined and moaned and bitched today. Iran sent an urgent letter to the UN Security Council warning that no state may invoke human rights or supporting the people, quote unquote, to incite violence, destabilize societies, or engineer unrest, calling such claims a distortion of international law. But when they do it with Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel, then they're totally in the right. And also in Yemen with the Houthis. And also in Iraq with al-Nusra. Basically, everywhere that Iran does it is completely justified. But when anyone does that against them, it's all wrong now, and they're going to go run to mommy, and they're going to go tell mommy UN that they're getting bullied, and they want the bad bully to stop doing what they're doing to them. That's stupid. So, the Iranians, once again, folks, like the people they are, in the government, they sit there and they sponsor terrorism around the entirety of the world, and they destabilize countries endlessly, especially in the Middle East. And then once it starts happening to them, then they want to whine and moan. So moving on from that, we've also been able to hear that apparently an IRGC colonel was killed today. IRGC Colonel Mahdi Rahimi has been killed in an anti-regime protest today. He was responsible for IRGC troops shooting and killing around 10 protesters in Malik Shahi on January 3rd, and the surviving protesters found out where he lived, and they actually broke into his home and beat him to death in the middle of his house. So, that was a wild story today, and apparently showing that the protesters, much like elephants, do not forget. That was interesting. Anyways, we also were able to hear that the Iranians are now threatening to counterattack the United States and other forces in the area. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, speaking to the Iranian parliament, has stated that if the United States carries out strikes against Iran, they will target Israeli and American military bases across the Middle East, making it incredibly clear that they will be planning on going into a full-scale war with the United States if we try and get involved in support of the revolutionaries and trying to stop the massacre that they're now orchestrating against their own people. So, a little bit interesting with that one. And also, by the way, we have been able to hear that apparently, within the city of Tehran alone, around $20 million in damage has been caused by the revolutionaries and the protesters so far. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we have heard a preliminary estimate coming from the Iranian government saying that Tehran, the capital, has suffered already 20 million USD in damage so far, which is the equivalent to, I think, I can't remember exactly. It's like 30 trillion Iranian rial or something. It's like some crazy amount of Iranian currency because their currency is so devalued. But 20 million USD in our currency. And also a top IRGC colonel was also killed and taken out as well. So what are your thoughts about that? Because obviously that's not good for the Iranian regime. But 49% said the Iranian government is losing this battle, while 27% said it's too early to tell who's winning. And only 18% said the Iranian revolutionaries are winning. So that's actually quite interesting right there. It looks like most people believe that apparently the Iranians are losing the battle, but they're not really sure if the Iranian revolutionaries are winning, actually. So I'll be honest, at this point, it seems like the revolutionaries are persistent, but now it's becoming clear that since Tehran is willing to step down to such lows, basically, well, I almost choke right there. They're willing to stoop to such lows, basically, that they have to have U.S. intervention to help with this thing, or otherwise it's not going to go their direction, at least in my personal opinion. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be straight up. It almost sounded like you were about to choke to death on air right there. Like,
man, I'm not gonna lie. I was sipping some coffee before you announced that poll right there. You sprung it on me too quick. I was trying to gulp some coffee down before you said that. So I was like still trying to digest that coffee when you said that. I was like, dang, man, this is jumping on this whole thing quick.
Man, I was trying to jump onto it because we're getting on into the other stuff right after this. I was like, damn, I got to get to this before we move on. But I would say that I would actually be with the 49%. The Iranian government is losing the battle generally. But at the same time, I do have to say that they are conducting significant atrocities against the revolutionaries, which might start to turn this back towards their favor. So it's a little bit hard to say how this is going to go in the long run, but I would say that the situation on the ground as of today is still generally showing that the Iranian government is still losing momentum at the moment, although they're quite literally killing as many people as they can to try and regain the momentum at this point. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion, and we are now going to be moving out of the Islamic Republic of Iran and getting on into the rest of the news that we have in the Middle East, which moves us on into Syria. We have been able to hear that near to the area of Aleppo, the Syrian interim government's armed forces are still still continuing to surround the area. Actually, really quickly, folks, I'm sorry, that's actually a duplicate clip of the Turkish convoys that are moving through the Idlib region. I can't show you all the full clip of this. You see the watermark right there that kind of gives me the reason why I can't show the full clip. But it appears that they're moving in some form of an SPG. Seems to me like it's a Panzerhaubitze 2000. That seems to highly likely be what's under that tarp. But they're moving more forces into the Turkish-occupied areas of northern Syria for unknown purposes at the moment. The fighting is still going on at Sheikh Massoud within Aleppo, and it doesn't appear that that's going to be ending anytime soon, as the besieged SDF forces within that area are basically giving it everything they've got to hold it and try and stop the atrocities that the Syrian interim army is conducting against the people within that neighborhood. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of that area and on down into Israel, because the Israelis have weighed in that they apparently expect a U.S. intervention in Iran soon. We don't know what they mean by soon. A couple of weeks soon, a couple of days soon. It's definitely not a couple of days, but a couple of weeks soon. 2 weeks. Give it 2 weeks, folks. That's probably what they mean. So we'll have to wait and see. The Israelis did bomb southern Lebanon again, though, today. Just a knee-jerk reaction sort of a deal. And here's the clip.
Oh, wow.
Oh, look, a little transformer went out right there.
Oh,
man.
That was crazy. What angle did that come in from?
I think it came in over this guy's head almost.
Hey, back that up for a second. That was weird. It looked like it did like a loop around it.
Oh, no, it just... It's just
That's
the way
crazy. That was like a weird optical illusion at first. Oh, we just said the goal.
Hey,
we hit the goal.
We hit the goal.
Heram Slava. Heram Slava.
Man, we hit the goal. We hit it go. I gotta say a huge shout out to everyone, including Hal Rose, who just threw in that $333 donation. It says anonymous, but we know who that anonymous person is. And I gotta say a humongous thanks and a congrats to everyone who's continued to support these fundraisers, especially this one for Razom For Ukraine tonight, as we have hit another fundraising goal. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many people continue to support the cause of Western and American interests around the globe, no matter who else is. The LSA will always be there supporting our interest, and I gotta say, a wonderful and incredible thing to see that so many people are continuing to support these fundraisers and help them get to where they're going. And so with that, we're going to be getting on back into the video of these strikes. Oh, a second one.
That guy just yelled, dang. Oh, well, he yelled that too.
Oh, wow. I guess, Lebanon kind of is an unofficial part of Syria.
Say it again.
Allah Akbar! Like, man, like,
whoa.
oh, buddy. Moving on from that and on out of the region of the Middle East, it's time for us to get on over, folks, and into the United States of America. As on top of the threat of the annexation militarily of Greenland, we have been able to hear that apparently there's now new threats being made on Cuba. Cuba, if many of y'all may be unfamiliar with the nation, is an island nation within the Caribbean. It's actually a former part of New Spain, which was a colony that was created by the Spanish crown back in the very early ages of the era of exploration. This island has existed since about the 1950s, the late 1950s, as a communist state, and many people may know it due to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is generally where John F. Kennedy believed that there was a missile inside of Cuba. And he, in response to that, he kind of got a little unhappy. Of course, everybody knows that was nothing more than a hoax, and there was no reason to do that at all, and Kennedy just hated America and wanted to get into a third world war. Luckily, the Russians understood. I'm just kidding, by the way. The truth is that there were IRBMs that the Soviets had put inside of Cuba. The U.S. satellite photography by U-2 spy planes had confirmed that, and so then we created a U.S. military blockade of the island to force a withdrawal of the IRBMs by the Soviet Union out of Cuba, just to get out of the whole fake story that I was putting out as a form of satire. In response to that, the Soviet Union still tried to break the blockade. We then depth charged a Soviet submarine that attempted to break the blockade and forced it to the surface. And while that was happening, there was actually negotiations going on between Khrushchev and Kennedy, and an agreement had been made that for the U.S. removing its nuclear weapons from northern Turkey, the Soviets removed their nuclear weapons from Cuba. So basically an equal exchange of a withdrawal of nuclear weaponry. And then that was agreed upon quietly, and in the U.S. it was publicly said that we had won the blockade and the Soviets were going to withdraw their IRBMs from Cuba. Although it was more of an equal exchange of a withdrawal of our IRBMs from Turkey and their IRBMs from Cuba. So then that's the situation. But that's how a lot of people would know Cuba. But the President of the United States has stated the following about Cuba today. Cuba lived for many years on large amounts of oil and money from Venezuela. I'll be honest with you, I don't think they're getting a lot of oil from Venezuela because the last time I looked at Cuba, most people were riding around on like horse-drawn carriages down there because they have no gas. So I don't really think they're getting a lot of oil from Venezuela. I'm just going to say that up front. In return, Cuba provided security services. That just sounds so sus, Matty. I don't know what it is about the way that was worded, but that sounds sus.
Why? What sounds sus?
It just sounds like a certain other kind of services. The way that was like Cuba provided said services. Like it just comes off like,
Man, I'll catch your drift on this one. Dang, what are you talking about, man?
I'm not gonna lie, it just sounds sus to me, folks. Don't y'all see that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but for the last two Venezuelan dictators, but not anymore. Most of these Cubans are dead from last week's USA attack, and Venezuela doesn't need protection anymore from the thugs and extortionists who held them hostage for so many years. Venezuela now has the United States of America, the most powerful military in the world, by far, parentheses, to protect them, and protect them we will. There will be no more oil or money going to Cuba. Zero. I strongly suggest they make a deal before it's too late. So, they apparently were giving the Cubans another little threat. And I don't know what deal they're supposed to make. Because if you look at Cuba's export tree map, it's very sad looking. Let me go get it for y'all. This is the latest tree map that we have of what they export. 36% is raw sugar, 19% is rolled tobacco, 7.8% is hard liquor, 10% is nickel mats. Let's see.
What the hell's that?
I don't even know. 5.5% is crustaceans, 4.6% is refined petroleum, and then somewhere down here, somewhere in here, is human organs. I forgot which one it is, but it makes up like 1.9. Oh yeah, here it is. Human or animal organs and glands and other organs. It makes up about 2% of their exports. So there's a huge organ harvesting market that exists inside of Cuba, and it's a big way that they make their money. But beyond
this
that,
seems like basically like an economy based on knickknacks, almost. Like this doesn't seem like really like high dollar exports.
yeah, I mean, it's not really like anyone's going, man, I can't wait to get that high quality raw sugar from Cuba. Like, I don't really hear a lot of people in the world going, yeah, that's really what I'm looking for. Like, I know people say Cuban cigars, but that's literally all that Cuba has going for it is their cigars. They have nothing else. So I don't really know what deal they're supposed to make with the United States. This is not like they have anything to even trade with. And also, by the way, all of this trade together, folks, totals to only 1.4 billion US dollars annually. So it's a non-existent economy. Like, they literally don't even have an economy in Cuba. So
Yeah. And also it says 2.7% wood, dot, 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 dot. So I guess maybe like wood products or something. Like, I don't know what's up with the three dots after wood. I guess there's something more to it.
yeah, I mean, folks, an economy is really bad off when 1.6% of their exports is just honey. Like literal edible honey from bees. Like you would never see that as a measurable percentage of any other economy in the world but Cuba's.
Yeah, it really is something. Also, semi-finished iron. They couldn't even finish the iron.
Yeah, like, man, it's kind of like half-assed done, but here you go. It's like here it is. And scrap aluminum. Like, so basically the only metals that they export, folks, is scrap from the cars that are breaking down in the country that they've had there since the 50s, when Bautista was the dictator of the country. And also someone said, what do you mean human organs? Well, that's what I mean. I mean, human organs are a significant export out of Cuba. It's kind of a thing that they do. They have, like, y'all know, folks, that like whole joke that people have about, you see like a nice woman and she's really pretty and then she brings you back to the hotel and then the next thing you know, you're waking up in a bathtub filled with ice and your kidney's gone. That's what they do in Cuba a lot. It's like an industry, in a literal measurable industry, and a part of their economy in Cuba is that sort of human organ export from people who just have their organs extracted. So it's a pretty messed up sort of economy, considering that makes up 1.5% of their total exports nationally annually. So a little bit of a country that doesn't have much to offer. So I don't know what deal they're supposed to make. That's kind of the thing that has me questioning here. What the hell deal will we even be looking for? Getting knickknacks like from the Cubans? Like, I don't even know. Like, I have no clue, folks. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I don't know. Like, I gotta be honest with y'all. At this point, I'm chalking all this up to like distraction stuff from something else. But I don't even know how the hell this is actually supposed to make any sense. So we're just going to leave it at that and move on out of the whole deal with the Cuban announcement. But we're also threatening war against Cuba now, unless they make some form of a deal for something. So with that, we are going to be moving on out of the United States of America and on and over and into the area of Europe. But before we do have a poll. Will Cuba be attacked soon? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so Cuba is now in the sights of the United States yet again, and we did see that the Cuban security services, the enforcer found very interesting, apparently did not hold up that well to that sonic weapon that was allegedly used around the presidential palace. Apparently they got a bloody nose in the whole situation, but apparently a lot worse. But the U.S. is now telling Cuba to make a deal before it's too late to make a deal, and they say that Cuba is ready to fall because all of a sudden Cuba is getting a little wobbly. So our strikes imminent. 32% said yes, Cuba will be attacked soon, while 26% said the U.S. is simply bluffing Cuba, and 27% said no, Cuba will strike a deal soon because they are deal makers. They like that money. So I would say this. What is preventing Cuba from being taken? Not very much, to be honest. So the U.S. has a lot of leverage to tell Cuba to make a deal. I'm not really sure what deal they're trying to make, to be honest. What is the deal, by the way, Enforcer? Do you even know what the deal is?
It's just make a deal of any type.
Just like any deal, like just like oil, or like, well, what even is the deal? Because that's a crucial question there. I really don't have an answer to that. They simply say make a deal.
Well, they don't have any oil, and all they have is sugar and tobacco. So it would be a deal about sugar or tobacco, I suppose.
I think you actually, now that I sort of gave it some thought, it might be a deal to maybe like install like a Western aligned government in Cuba, possibly, because we don't really know exactly what they have to trade, which is obviously not very much. They don't have very much to trade at all. So maybe they mean make a deal as to like let the U.S. government take their country over, perhaps, or something like that. Really though, here's an interesting question. I know this might be controversial, but if the U.S. wanted to take Cuba over, would there be any international objections to it? Like, for example, would Russia step in? Would China step in? Would that really even happen?
Technically, Russia would make a huge stink about it because Russia actually has some sort of a standing cooperation agreement with the Cubans militarily. That's why that little Russian flotilla arrived in Havana a while ago, was to just show that that still is an operant and existing sort of a policy between the two. So the Russians would have an issue with it, but there's no way that they could come over here and actually help them out. So technically, we could invade them and basically no one would be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily, I've said it before, I'm not in favor of just going around and like taking over countries. That's usually how empires start to fall, is by doing things like that. So not a good thing to do. But if the United States were to entertain that idea of taking over Cuba, it would be strategic for the U.S. to have it, because Cuba has always been a point of contention for hostile powers to install missile systems there. Also, there's been allegations that maybe foreign powers want to install nuclear installations inside of Cuba. So it would be strategic, obviously. And if there wasn't any real international backlash that could come out of it, I guess you could just take Cuba, perhaps. But the problem is, though, in my view, is it does encourage countries like China that have these imperialistic ambitions to, like, for example, take Taiwan. It gives them another little nudge to sort of move forward with invading Taiwan. Because if the U.S. could do it with Cuba, if they can do it with Venezuela, then why can't China do it with Taiwan at that point? There's nothing holding them back because the rules don't apply anymore, apparently. So while it would be nice to have Cuba, it's probably not the smartest thing geopolitically. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say this isn't really a good idea because Cuba isn't even worth the time of day, folks, just to be entirely honest. Cuba has nothing to offer. Cuba will require significant amounts of money and investment to even build them up into a country that would have anything to offer. Basically, it's completely pointless to even do anything with them. I mean, it's like nobody really cares about Cuba anymore. The Chinese don't. The Russians don't. Basically, nobody does. The Chinese did set up some sort of a listening post in Cuba a while ago. From what we know, that hardly even is operational, and it doesn't even seem to be that major of a threat. So I don't know, folks. Like, I don't really give a damn about Cuba, to be entirely honest with y'all. Especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they've basically gone into a permanent economic depression. And I don't really understand what in the world we would really get out of the Cubans if we did anything with them. So,
Hmm.
mhm.
Now, one thing you just mentioned that because you rekindled my memory there for a second when you said the listening bases. That information came out back in mid 2024 about the four suspected Chinese spy bases in Venezuela or in Cuba. Apparently, those are real. I did some more looking here to see if they got more confirmation about that. They did confirm that China has had at least four spy bases in Cuba at least since 2019. So those are still active, according to what we know, based on the public reporting. They are active, and apparently they're listening posts that China uses to listen in to our country. But also remember, at the same time, though, China's going around the domestic United States, buying up farmland, and also allegedly setting up listening sites there as well. So, I mean, they have listening sites literally on our territory, and also they have these bot farms on our territory as well. So that's a lot closer than Cuba. But apparently they have spy bases, at least four, on the territory.
Also, someone just said, this is not a video game. You just don't go take it. But you willing to put hundreds of thousands of U.S. soldiers on street corners getting killed daily. One thing I can promise you is that nobody in Cuba is going to have a problem with the Cuban government falling. That I can promise you. Like, I don't know, like, maybe people have short-term memories here with this, but Cubans have been trying to get to Florida for the past 60 years on whatever they can put together to make a raft. There's such a huge amount of them that fled to Cuba because it's so bad there that there's a humongous amount of Cuban enclaves down in southern Florida, in Miami and elsewhere. So I don't really think anyone would really have a problem in Cuba if we went down there and we got rid of their government. But the problem is that outside of that, because that doesn't really matter in this equation, is it really worth making the world look even more unstable with how bad off it is right now to go down and take care of Cuba, considering that it's strategically and economically insignificant to everyone on the planet? And to me, that doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I feel for the Cubans. It's a terrible situation that they find themselves in. They have a horrendous government, and they also have absolutely horrendous policies. But at the same time, though, that can't, like, we are not the crusaders of the world, and we cannot always be on that sort of a situation and on that level all the time, because if that was the case, we would be literally everywhere doing everything all the time. We would literally be in Africa endlessly, because yeah, I would say that a lot of African countries are actually far worse off than even the Cubans are right now. We would endlessly be in Central America, and we would also endlessly be in Central and Southeast Asia. And we can't be everywhere like that all the time. It's like, it's an unfortunate thing that the Cubans live in a nation like that, but right now we just got bigger fish to fry than getting distracted with every single minor small fry in the world right now and going down there and making that our problem. That's just the truth of it.
Imagine though how nice of a vacation spot that could be for Americans if we had Cuba. They could put some resorts there, possibly put a big letter T on the side of them, perhaps for
Maybe a golf course.
aesthetic reasons. Cuba could be really nice. Like, in all seriousness, I'm not in favor of just going invading countries to have new vacation spots, but I mean, Cuba could be a very nice place for tourism if they had a decent government. That place could probably have a lot more Americans wanting to go there as well if they actually had a government that was friendly, actually raised the place up properly. It could be nice, but it's not our job to go around the world building up economies. That's not our job. If we were to do that, we're going to fall as a country. We can't even manage our own economy right now. So how the hell are we going to build up other people's economies?
Also, we're about to get rid of the largest economy that we trade with, which is the Europeans over Greenland. So I don't really think this is our biggest priority right now. I think we have more important ones going on. But, I mean, if Cuba didn't have its communist government, it could end up a lot like the Dominican Republic, which, is a former Spanish colony. And actually, funnily enough, folks, in the Americas, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the Dominican Republic now has the third highest median income in the Americas, third only to Canada and the United States, because they went heavy into the tourism industry. So basically, their entire nation and its government revolves around tourist dollars. And it's really pretty down there. Like, it's actually insanely nice in the Dominican Republic. And one day I'd like to go there myself because it actually looks like a real tropical paradise. It even looks like, honestly, better to me than the Florida Panhandle, and you can't really get better than the Florida Panhandle, in my opinion, or
Yeah.
Southern California.
Also, there was another place that someone was telling me about. I think it's called Port-au-Prince. I think they're saying it's a very nice vacation spot. Like, it's really fantastic. Have you seen it?
Man, I have seen it, and Port-au-Prince, folks, is truly a magical place filled with magical charms. Y'all want to see it? Take a look. Look at that. Look at
They
that.
say that they have community barbecues here, but apparently the community barbecue is run by a guy named Barbecue because he's such a enthusiast. Like he's such a grill master that he literally named himself after the whole event. They named himself Barbecue. He's a real nice guy. So some people say that he's the nicest guy on the block. Some people, slander him a little bit. They say he's a nasty guy, but he's not that nasty. He's just a war criminal. That's all.
You know, Haiti isn't too
Also,
bad.
by the way, I'm joking. For the record, I'm joking. Barbecue's a nasty individual, by the way. Just to make that perfectly clear.
Haiti isn't too bad, folks. I mean, sure, Barbecue's eating a guy here and there, but he's just expressing his frustrations. I mean, it's mostly a peaceful country. There's not really a lot that goes on in Haiti that would make you think that it's a unmitigated hellhole run by gangs that kill people indiscriminately wherever they can find them. That'd be ridiculous. I mean, that'd be absolutely crazy. I mean, look at it, folks. You can even see it from space. When we zoom out here, let me see if I can get rid of some of the markers here on the map. Labels, let's get rid of them. So if you look right here, folks, what's funny is that you can actually see the border between the Dominican Republic and Haiti from space. Did you realize that, Matthew, until now? The Dominican Republic side is covered in trees, and then as soon as the border starts with Haiti, it literally turns into nothing but basically like a sun-scorched hell because they deforested the whole place and they never replanted the trees.
Yeah, it's crazy too. And also, in Haiti, they trade in gasoline in like plastic bottles. And it's not good to put gasoline in a plastic bottle. That's not going to work out too well. But that's how they sell the gas in like plastic containers like that.
Yeah, it's a really wild sort of a thing. It's actually like an insane place, but Haiti is not a place you want to go, folks. I think everyone already knows that. You never want to go to Haiti. You will probably die in Haiti. But beyond that, though, we're going to be moving on out of the Americas and on out of the Caribbean. And it's time for us, folks, to make it on over into Europe because we're about to be getting on into the actual war in Ukraine. But before we get to that, we have a couple of small details to cover in Europa. First off, we were able to hear that a significant NATO commander today, NATO's top commander in Europe, which is Grinkowicz. Let's get it, boy. He's the commander of U.S. Army Europe and Africa, and also I believe he is also the Supreme Allied Commander of all NATO forces in Europe. But he warned that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are deepening their strategic cooperation in ways that threaten alliance security with coordination visible from Ukraine's battlefields to the Arctic Ocean. Get him, Grinkowicz. Talking that common sense. We appreciate it. We also were unfortunately able to hear that Grinkowicz has been removed from his position. I'm just kidding, by the way, folks. He has not been removed from his position. Grinkowicz is a real one. He's the guy, by the way, folks, that recently said that if the Russians wanted to go to war with NATO, we were going to steamroll and level Kaliningrad in like 3 weeks flat. So I respect him greatly. He laid it out quite openly and quite commonsensically. And I really appreciate that. And also some people are like, what word is that? Commonsensically. I made that up. Moving on up into Denmark, we did also get to hear that while Grinkowicz is being a real one and an absolute OG, up in Denmark, they're still having this situation with the United States over Greenland. And the Danish Prime Minister has made the following. Denmark will not hand over Greenland even if the USA threatens us with nuclear weapons. I'm not saying this to stump our chest and try to be tough. We are small and no match for the United States. We know that, but we are not doing it under any circumstances. So it appears that the Danish are continuing to hold their ground. I respect them for that, in that they will not give up Greenland under any circumstances whatsoever, even knowing that they would lose. Moving on from that and on up into the Oslo International Airport, we also were able to hear that their airport was closed today due to a drone sighting. This is the first drone sighting that we've heard about, folks, for about a whole month. And it appears that the drone sighting was seen for a little while. The police were searching for the drone, but it appears to have disappeared like all the other drones back in the day, and they weren't really able to find out who was flying it, why, and what type of drone it even was. So, moving on out of Norway, it's now time for us, folks, to get on into the war in Ukraine, because we have lots of news. Great news. Incredible news. To come
Ukraine.
From Ukraine.
They said they're having a problem with Danish. They said, do you want cherry or cream cheese?
And I said, I would like another Billy.
I don't need Danish, I need ammo.
I do not need your stupid pastries. I need guns. Lots of them. Loads of guns. So many guns. And some people say it's because I'm a warmonger. But in my defense, my freaking country's being invaded. And it's kind of stupid for the same group of people who talk about they have to arm themselves to possibly overthrow their government for some stupid reason, are then criticizing me as the leader of a country for defending my country against a foreign invader. It makes no sense at all. But Really, it's absolutely pitiful.
But moving on from that, it's time for us to get on into the war in Ukraine. Moving us on into the location unknowns, we were able to see that today there was a little bit of Russian equipment that was found today near to the front. Now, you know, I would talk about that burning thing in the background, but this ugly little cart that appears to have been homemade really took the cake for me. What is that, Matthew? What was that before they turned that into what it is?
I don't know, man. That thing's scaring me right there. I don't know what that is, but it looks like something that they could have found from a back market somewhere. This thing, it looks honestly like, give me a little moving shot of it real quick. Let me see a little bit of the motion.
They didn't show it again.
Yeah, go back it up then. Back it up. Let me see this thing again. I would say it looks like it was probably maybe some type of stretched golf cart.
Also, what is this guy riding on, Matthew? A John Deere lawnmower on mow mode?
This thing like has no muffler on it. Like it is like straight engine noise off this thing.
Dude, it's going like 3 miles an hour. I think this guy is literally riding a lawnmower with the blades on.
What the приезжал? Отрабатывай!
Надо
This
Also,
thing's only got one speed.
bro, it's maxing out to go 3 miles an hour. Also, by the way, folks, that is a TOS 1 over there. And it was blown up, and this one was actually kind of special because it apparently was a newly built one, because it was actually on the hull of a T-90, and there's very minimal distinctions between a normal T-72 hull and that of a T-90, but it was a T-90 hull on this TOS 1, which is apparently showing that this was a newly produced one, a very rare one for that reason, and it was destroyed.
It's choking out.
Yeah.
Look at it. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
This thing is literally flooding the engine, like going up a 1 foot hill. Like that is crazy. This thing's got no power.
Bro, also, man, look at that fender on this thing, dude. I think this is like legitimately a lawnmower because look how wide the fender is on that thing.
That's insane, man. It's like somebody added a body kit to like a freaking Cub Cadet, like a lawnmower.
Deploying tactical mower.
Oh my god. Moving on from that clip and on to the next one. We also got to see a Ukrainian Bodana in position. This is not the Bodana self-propelled gun. This is the Bodana towed artillery piece. Pretty unique to see it. We very rarely ever see a towed Bodana, but pretty cool to see it at work. We also got to see Russian nearby to an ammo depot that was cooking off today. We don't know where this depot was, but it was one hell of a trip. Man, he said, damn, this ammo depot is going up so badly, I'm going to have to huck a loogie.
that was wet too. You could hear that one. Let's hear that one more time. Listen to it. You can hear it. It was wet. Oh man, you know what happens? It happens.
Also, he's trying to get out of there. The gates of hell are just opening up behind him down there. Satan's coming out. Oh, nice flagging himself right in the face. Like,
really? Jeez, that was bad.
Great job, Bozo. Oh.
You see the scorching. You see the scorching going on around the corner over there. It's lit up. It's lit up orange.
He's gonna look back at it hopefully again in a second here.
What the hell is that stuff right there? What is that? What is that? Some of that white powder?
I think that's some of that like sealant.
Yeah.
Badly
I'm
applied.
joking all the way.
Oh, Monster Energy drinks. That's what we need in an ammo dump explosion. We always need some Monster Energy drinks. Kind of a little bit of weird ad insert, but, you know, I can't judge. Well, that's the end of that clip right there. Have to say, that was a pretty good one. But moving on from that, we also got the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours, and the Kyiv Independent finally pulled through again. MSDC Keeper of the Records stated the following: 654 drones destroyed is the 8th highest daily loss, and there was a big increase in tanks and artillery, which we're always happy to hear. Over the past 24 hours, 1,130 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 3 APCs, 134 supply trucks, 11 tanks, 44 artillery pieces, 654 drones, and 1 MLRS. All in all, a pretty good day, and we're always happy to see it. Moving on from that, it's time for us now to get on into the front. We were able to see the Ukrainians taking some Russian soldiers prisoner after their long stay in the middle of Kupiansk, completely encircled for about the past 3 weeks. You see him looking out over the landscape of the city, taking in the sights and the sounds. Look, an old Soviet battlefield, and behind us is a burned out building. But if we've walked...
Oh, Soviet disaster. Oh, look, some old Soviet blokes in handcuffs.
Look at them. I bet if we talk to them, we're going to get an interesting story.
Есть что вам передать ваших парней? А ну скажите.
This guy sat there and said, I don't have any money. Like, bro. Meanwhile, this guy's over here going, I thought we were in the Russian side. That's like, good job, man.
Есть тебе
Oh,
что
we got this
сказать?
guy with a special little camo pattern. Well, he must be level 10 in the game, because it looks like he's not using the normal Radnik pattern. It looks like he's using some sort of a puke vomit pattern from Iran.
Моим близким, родным, которые с тобой приехали, друзьям.
He's not very talkative. Not the friendliest fella. Mike said they look a little bit dodgy, I would say.
They do.
It's just totally.
Man, I'm just saying, but what the hell's all this like stuff on the back of the wall back there? Are you seeing this stuff?
Oh, it's just props. Like, it's
Man,
props.
what the hell is this stuff in the back? This is looking like a sketchy place.
You know why we brought you here. Oh, no.
Really? Mike explained when the guy's got his hands up.
Man, he said, I don't have anything on me and I don't have anything in me, so leave me alone. It's like it.
Ну, я понимаю, никто не послушает вас. Я не знаю, что вам сказать, мужики.
That laugh is not instilling any confidence after you pointed out what's in the background. Like, he's like, I'm like,
Загоняют палками.
А вот теперь смотри, кто отсюда уезжает обратно, стоит там перед камерой и говорит, что нас пиздили, нас били, нас убивали. Знаешь, да, это?
Ну, я вот таких видео просто не наблюдал, не смотрел.
Look at this nice civil conversation between these two men.
Многократно.
Вот когда вы
we
приезжали
got
сюда,
ultra
о
rare
чем
camo
думали,
over here
что
on the
будет
left.
с вами, какое обращение?
That guy over there on the left kind of looks like Filthy Frank.
It's time to stop.
А ты что тут делаешь вообще?
Uh-oh. You don't ever want to hear your captor laughing like
Ты
that.
гражданин России, да?
He's just giving a little scare, you know.
А кому ты звонишь на украинские номера, с кем ты общаешься?
Украинский.
Да. Вот у тебя набраны на 050.
But generally, it's just them chit-chatting with the prisoners they took in the middle of Pokrovsk. It's, old camaraderie, as they call it. Moving on from that, we also were able to see the Russian forces getting hit by the Omega Special Operations Forces. Bloop. There we go. Dead on hit.
Boom.
Boom. Bleh.
Notice the technique here. Notice the headlock here. Look at this. This is the man here that touched me with the warmlet, sir. Look, this is him.
Get your hands off my... I can't think of anything right now. I was trying to think of something for a drone clip. I was like, you know what? I can't think of anything. I'm drawing a blank. But moving on from that and further on down the front and into the area of Konstantinivka, we also were able to see them chasing down some Russians on some motorcycles. There they go. And here comes the drone. The Russians were none the wiser to this, that they're being chased by this drone.
Wow. Is this sped up footage or is this has got to be sped up?
This is sped up. Yeah, this part is.
Yeah, I was about to say this. There's no way this drone's going this fast. And also, these guys are not that good of a motorcycle rider to go that fast either.
Oh, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're good or not because it's all about to come to an end here quite soon. You see, he spotted the drone.
Oh,
Oh, and he went off road, and it was over for
Oh.
him. Oh,
how come they never hit the brakes? Like, it's like common sense to me. I would think just tap the brakes. That drone's gonna fly past.
Well, yeah, some of them have tried to do that, but the drone will just circle back after that and get them anyways. So it kind of works until it doesn't. Basically, once a drone spots you, there's really no way to evade it. You either have to shoot it down or it's going to get you. There's really nothing you can do once it sees you rather than shoot it. So with that, moving on down to Pokrovsk, we also were able to see the Ukrainians taking down some longer range drones. Take a look at this.
Oh, they're back to building those cardboard nasties again.
As someone said, why would I donate money to Ukraine? Their dictator will just steal and buy more coke. I'm sure your family has experience with that.
Also, it's like the money's not going to the Ukrainian government. It's going to Razom. It's a nonprofit.
Yeah, I don't think people get the nuances that sometimes, maybe been, huffing paint or something. I don't know. But anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on from that clip and on into the next one further on down, where we also were able to see them hitting some Russian forces here in this clip between Pokrovsk and Munifred. Oh, they took a run from their car, but it cooked up nicely anyways.
They jumped straight into the mud, too. That was bad. They just jumped straight down into it. Oh, what was all that crap on the roof? You saw that stuff like underneath that cage up there? What was that? Fuel?
Looks like electronic warfare stuff, I think.
Interesting. They put that stuff they used to play with on like the playground and stuff like that to like guard it. Whatever those and they're not monkey bars, but they're like something else, like the little like arc thing right there. I don't know what they're called, but somebody can tell me though.
Man, I don't know what they are called either. Like this guy's like, I don't know. But
it's called a sprain your leg and break your leg thing. Those were dangerous, by the way. Like I remember, I almost broke my arm on those stupid monkey bars when I was younger. Like I fell off that thing and screwed my arm up for like weeks.
Really?
Yeah, you don't remember that? Like I was screwed up for a while. I couldn't even I think I also messed my leg up too. I was really young. Like I fell off those things. That was a big drop for like a youngin.
You broke
Yeah,
your
that was
arm.
a big one. Yeah, it didn't break it, but I sprained it really bad. And also my leg too. I was like screwed up for weeks. I was having to be carried everywhere. It was a damn shame.
I'd have to say, I definitely agree. Meanwhile, we also were able to see this S-8. Okay, we're going to mute that. But we see this S-8 rocket fire from a helicopter hitting Russian positions in that tree line in the field.
Somebody said, I don't care.
Oh, man. I gotta say, something else right here, something else. But anyways, with that, that's the end of that clip. And moving on out of the Pokrovsk front, we didn't get any footage from the rest of the Ukrainian front line today, so it's now time for us to move on up to Kyiv and get the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, of day 1418 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Сьогодні весь день звіт від прем'єр-міністра Юлії Свириденко, наших урядовців, офісу по ситуації в регіонах. Відновлювальні роботи, електрика, опалення, головні теми. Є громади, де ситуація досі надзвичайно складна. На жаль, зокрема у частині міст і сіл прикордонних областей. У Києві ще тривають ремонтні роботи після удару, що відбувся позавчора. Головне завдання – відновити енергозабезпечення усіх будинків. І також на Київщині працюють майже 200 ремонтних бригад. Активно допомагають ДСНС України. Дякуємо вам. Бровари, Васильків, Фастів, Бориспіль – там найскладніше. Багато зроблено, але досі ще значна кількість родин без електрики. Загалом по країні розгорнуті пункти незламності в усіх регіонах, залучені сили Укрзалізниці, Нафтогазу, інших наших державних компаній. Дніпровщина, Запорізька область, Харківщина, Донеччина – всюди наші енергетики зараз. Ремонтні бригади, всі комунальні служби, які дійсно працюють, які дійсно роблять неймовірні і справді героїчні речі. Жорстка зимова погода додає складнощів. Саме тому так непросто, саме такою погодою росіяни намагаються скористатись. І я дякую кожному і кожній в Україні, хто ось так ремонтами, ось так відновленням, попри все, на захисті життя. Говорив з головкомом Сирським, передусім ми говорили з головкомом про ППО та постачання від партнерів, що в дорозі, що необхідно, і які запити досі не реалізовані, що прискорити. Перший пріоритет – це ракети для ППО. Зокрема, завтра одна із зустрічей, на якій будемо ми про це говорити. Потрібні нові внески партнерів в програму Pearl, потрібне і постачання зі складів у Європі, ракети на складах є, і ми про це знаємо, і знаємо про це все. Мають бути у наших захисників неба. Була сьогодні доповідь Ростема Умєрова по спілкуванню з американською стороною. Ми плануємо графік зустрічей та подальших перемовин. І Україна у цьому максимально конструктивна та максимально швидка. Час ми не затягуємо, на відміну від Росії. Ті вже дозатягувалась, якщо чесно. Повномасштабна війна Росії проти України триває вже стільки ж, скільки війна нацистської Німеччини проти Радянського Союзу. Сьогодні 1418-й день війни Росії проти України. Вони хотіли повторити і повторили знущання з людей, повторили фашизм, повторили майже все та найгірше, що було в 20 столітті. Навіть ще додатково накреативили війну шахедами та балістикою проти електростанцій та котелень. Але все одно росіяни намагаються захопити той самий Донбас, що й майже 4 роки тому. Хочуть ще раз збрехати, що взяли Куп'янськ, гинуть безкінечно в полях на Запоріжжі і воюють досі проти однієї України. При всій допомозі наших партнерів тільки наші люди тримають фронт. Це багато говорить про ту систему, яку збудував Путін. І просто про нього особисто. Російські втрати складають зараз кожного дня не менше, ніж 1000 убитих за добу. Від грудня так. І це Росія так платить фактично за те, щоб війна не закінчилась. Це божевілля. І це російське божевілля можна зупинити тільки об'єднаними силами Європи та Сполучених Штатів Америки, силами всіх наших партнерів. Кожен день війни – це нагадування, що світ не може захистити себе від божевільних. Треба захистити, треба зупинити Росію. Дякую всім, хто з Україною, дякую всім, хто допомагає нашим людям, нашій обороні, нашому відновленню. Дякую. Слава Україні!
Heroes Slava.
And Heroes Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, here on this very day of 1418 of the news from around the world. And that's going to be moving us on, folks, into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And I've got to say, folks, it's always an honor and a pleasure to be able to cover the news for all of y'all every single day, 6 days a week, every night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, usually. But I do have to say, folks, that I am looking forward to tomorrow. Today marks I believe it is the 13th day straight that we've worked in a row on live streams and videos nonstop throughout the last 2 weeks. Given the fact that there was major news and developments, while I just stuttered my way through that like damn King George VI in the King's Speech. But beyond that, we've been working 13 days nonstop so far this year. We've literally been working every single day of this year so far, no joke. And I got to say that we're always entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many of y'all have been here with us over the last 2 weeks of the very beginning of this new year, enjoying our news. But I also had to say, folks, I cannot wait to have a little bit of a breather tomorrow so that way we can get ready for the next streaming week afterwards. So at this moment, folks, at least mentally for me, we're already starting to wind on down and things are getting a lot more relaxed because we made it through the important stuff tonight, which is the news, and now we get to sit back with all of y'all, probably have a whole bunch of laughs, some good jokes, and also answer some really interesting questions at this point, which generally, to be entirely honest with y'all, this is the funnest part of the show for Matthew and me because we don't really have a set sort of I guess you could say bullet points that we have to get through. It could literally be anything and everything from this point on. So with that in mind, Matthew, do we have any more top donors that have thrown in support to the fundraiser? And if so, can we hear who those folks are?
Yes, we do have some more top donors of the night. And our first one goes to Hal Rose, who threw in a $333 donation, one of the largest ones of the night. And a huge shout out to Hal for that generosity. Also, a big shout out to Nick Hines for throwing in a $100 donation, as well as David Ferriello for putting in a $50, and also Chef Danny B for putting in a $50 as well, along with Snow White Signal Intelligence doing that SIG int out here. But a huge shout shout out to our top donors and everybody else. We are literally just $73 above the goal, and we literally squeaked that one out tonight. We squeaked it out, but it was hit yet again. And a huge shout out to the LSA for making that possible for a really good cause, which is Razom for Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta say, humongous thanks to all of y'all once again for massively supporting the fundraiser tonight. It's wonderful to know that we were able to surpass another fundraiser goal, and of course we were able to hear of a huge amount of channel legends that we were able to call out, not calling out, supporting this fundraiser tonight. I also have to say a huge thanks to everyone who's just joining our channel and supporting these fundraisers, because they help to save lives overseas in other countries that are aligned with ours in common interest for their own prosperity and ours, and also for our common security. I've got to thank everyone for always having a humongous amount of kindness and also empathy for those around the world, because they definitely thank y'all in spades for the amount of support and help that y'all give through these fundraisers. And so I hope I was able to address that incredibly well. I'm having a stammer. I'm the king. Like, I'm trying to. The King's Speech, by the way, is the reference there, folks. I'm not a king or anything. But with that, it is time for us to get on into the questions. And I understand, Matthew, that we have some juicy ones. So what do we got?
Yeah, so we've had some very juicy, well-done Wagyu steak-style questions tonight. But also, before we get into those good live chat questions, we also have some super chats to address. We have 3 of them to address before we jump into those live chat questions. And this one goes to Nick Hines, who not only threw in a donation to the fundraiser, but also threw in a super chat. He threw in a 50, and we appreciate that very much, Nick, for that support. He said, I heard that Ukraine now has a GDP of 2%, while Russia has a 0.5%. And I know that there are other factors that influence the economy, but will this impact the outcome of the war? And especially since Ukraine will be getting an additional 90 plus billion from the allies.
Yes, it generally does affect how a war is fought, is how much money is being spent. That's actually a very big part of fighting a war. And it's very interesting because a lot of people who aren't really well-versed in warfare, which is most people, because everyone's got a life to get to and everything, a lot of people think that a war is always about military prowess on the field. Like, are your riflemen more accurate than the others? Can they fire at a greater range? Can they endure more strife and hardship on the front? And the real answer is that in reality, that matters a good bit, but it's hardly even a part or a factor in the equation. One of the hugest ones is military spending and an economy that supports an armed force. And considering that Ukraine's economy is a fair bit smaller than Russia's, but they're augmented by unbelievably massive amounts of Western military support, generally the Ukrainians, for that reason, have been able to outspend the Russian Federation up until this point, or at least match their spending to where the Russians can never gain any significant advantage, at least in Ukraine lacking firepower to stop a Russian advance. So in reality, the answer is yes, that will actually impact the Russian Federation, because that significant amount of money that they're spending on their military could be spent elsewhere to either keep their infrastructure operational, to keep their economy running, to keep paying out some forms of welfare in their country, which Russia is a welfare state, so that's incredibly important to social balance and social function within their country. The fact that all of that's being stripped bare to support the war effort is causing economic damage back at home, and it's also making it a lot harder for them to bail out their companies that are also running out of money, because that money that would have been given to them to bail them out and keep them alive and keep the economy going is instead being spent on the war, and they really have no choice but to do that. So the answer to that is yes. It actually has a humongous impact on who is doing better in the war and who's going to end up making it to the end. And also the other important thing here is that with the Ukrainians getting $90 billion in military support, that's not raw cash for them. And if the war ends, that military support is still going to be given to them, but it's nothing that really gives them any intrinsic monetary value. Military equipment is basically useless outside of it being used as military equipment. It's very rare to see any military equipment repurposed except for supply trucks and maybe some tanks, because you can actually take the turret off of most tanks and use them as some form of heavy machinery in an industry or for agriculture, but that's usually exceptionally rare. You usually see that in former Soviet republics and such, but I would say that there is a pretty decent chance that the Ukrainians will probably be getting humongous amounts of economic support from the West after the war, because that's not money being thrown into a pit. That's a return on an investment right there. So I hope that has addressed the question the best I can. And a big thanks to you once again for asking a great question and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, Nick. And a huge thanks to you once again for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing alive. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $20 support, a super chat from JS Ghost, and thank you very much, Mr. Ghost, for that support. He said, as a vet, you guys are the real deal, and my question is, will the U.S. keep their word stated along with the Zelensky and Mar-a-Lago that they would help with air support as a security guarantee?
And I thank you for the high praise, by the way, JS, and thank you so much for the support. And it's always great to hear that veterans and currently serving get a great deal of value out of our show. Also, by the way, I do have to give a huge shout out to all my friends that I know in the armed forces who do watch the show quite regularly, because a decent amount of them are actually serving right now in very important locations, say in the Middle East. Some of them are, well, I can't really say where some of them are because that kind of would give away where they're at because there's so few people there. But I do have to give a huge shout out to all the folks that I know who are currently in the armed forces who also watch the show, because all of them are doing incredible work in service of the Republic and in our common defense. As far as the Mar-a-Lago promise, I would be entirely honest with you, JS, and I don't say this with any bias at all, but I have a pattern recognition type brain, which everyone has, and I recognize patterns. I would generally never count the president's word to be trusted for anything farther than what it was counted for that day. That could be backed off on the next time that comes up, and that's really how it is these days. There's, like, whenever the president says anything, 9 times out of 10, you can generally expect that there's going to be a 180 on that at some point in the future. Probably the next time it's brought up, probably is an attempted form of leverage or just due to the fact that he changed his mind. So, I would say that that's probably going to be the likelihood of what would happen in the future, is that if the Ukrainians tried to reapproach the United States and say that they promised some form of air support, the president would probably say that he never did, and in fact, I rated them for even saying that that was the guarantee that was given at Mar-a-Lago. So I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that addresses that the best we can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, we have one more super chat to get to. This one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 2. And Bruce said, quack. The Russian military uses Zap Brannigan's war strategy.
In Zach,
who is that?
I don't know. Like, I was like, Zap Brannigan. I was like, who is that? Oh, it's some cartoon character.
What's it from?
From Futurama.
I've never seen that.
Me either. I haven't seen it either. So I suppose I would take your word for it. I haven't personally watched Futurama myself, but I take your word for it. I have a feeling that that's probably where it's coming from. So I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that quite well, at least the best we can. And with that, it is time for us to move right on into the next one. What do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so our next one is actually our Morse code decoders of the stream. We had Paul Schultz, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush, Turk, Sire, and Brian. They said the Morse code says, can you believe that the Russians have been fighting longer than the Soviets in World War II and LLT, LSA?
And that is the Morse code message of the night. That's the sound of money. I got that den on the nail. A big congratulations to the Lee Spring Army Sentinel Corps. Holy moly, they got it right. I tell you, they get it right every night. It's really something. And it is crazy, folks. They've been fighting the war in Ukraine longer than World War II. You know, that's really something, folks, when you think about it. The Ukrainians have more resilience, at least militarily, than Germany did in World War II. Germany started their invasion of the Soviet Union and lost. And the amount of time that the Ukraine war has been going on, and the front has hardly moved several miles in 4 years in Ukraine. That honestly kind of shows you, folks, how overrated Germany was in the Second World War. I feel like that's an insane amount of overrated. Matthew. Like, everyone's like, oh man, the Germans in World War II, they had like UFOs and stuff. It's like, well, they lost their war in less time than Ukraine has been fighting theirs against Russia.
Yeah, it turns out that if the United States was doing that war, we would have finished that thing real early because, of course, the United States would be invading Ukraine, of course. So we'd have finished that real quick.
Some people say that if we tried to invade Ukraine, it would be like a military operation never before seen. People would say, wow, that's the greatest military operation, truly the greatest. And I definitely deserve a Nobel because while we have started, say, a couple of conflicts and we're threatening a couple, I have ended 8 in fiction, and that counts. So give me the money, like, and the medal. But beyond that, I would have to say, That's really something. I gotta say. Also, another thing that I gotta say is that people really do overrate Germany in the Second World War a whole lot, because the truth is that the only reason they ever won anything was because they usually would have the element of surprise and they would operate their battle plans pretty quickly. But if you were able to survive a blitz from them, they basically fell flat on their face after that and really couldn't do much anything. Their logistics were terrible, their strategies were terrible beyond the blitzkrieg, and they really, to be entirely honest, didn't have that great of a commander at the top because Hitler was an idiot. Like, if y'all ever go and listen to even what German generals in the Heer and generally the entire Wehrmacht were saying about him during the war, everyone was like, he's an idiot. But you have to follow his orders. And also, something else that a lot of people don't know is that the reason why a lot of German generals in the Second World War followed Hitler's orders, as far as grand strategy, not talking about everything else that they did that was atrocious, but talking about grand military strategy, the reason why they follow it, Matthew, and you wouldn't believe this, is because Hitler created a slush fund to pretty much pay them all, so that way he would just be guaranteed their loyalty because he was paying them bukus of money.
Yeah, so not only was he a bastard, he was also a crook.
Yeah, he was a crook. Like, I'm not a crook. He was. Like, he was a crook. But yeah, that's something crazy. There was a whole bunch of crazy people who were in charge of Germany during that time, A lot of people who were very eccentric, like the guy at the top, the mustache man, he thought very highly of himself. He had to have his pictures everywhere. He had to have his praise. He had this big thing about some prize that they give out in Norway, a really weird thing. And then there was these other people around him who did nothing but inflate him into this really big guy who was basically infallible and he couldn't be wrong and he was the leader and savior of the people. It's a very interesting sort of a government. But beyond that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least the best we can. And a big shout out to the Least Marine Corps because they did get that correct time and time again. And it's really impressive. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our first live chat question here, this one is going to go to none other than Hokey Redneck. And Hokey said, what are the odds of Greenland, Cuba, Mexico, and or Iran actions all at the same time? And honestly, I would say slim to none on all those at the same time because the Mexico thing, we're not even sure if the Mexico thing is going to happen because that would be a wild thing to do just to invade like our largest trading partner like that. That would be crazy. And also, we're not even sure if the Greenland thing is going to happen because to invade our NATO allies country of Denmark and Greenland, I mean, that would be crazy too. So the Cuba thing, I could see that happening. I could also definitely see Iran happening. That's almost maybe possibly imminent at this point. But Greenland and Mexico, that's a big question mark on that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that. And I'll just leave it at that. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a question from Sergeant Stryker, who said, do you think the U.S. will be hitting those cartel labs this year?
Nah, I don't think so. That would cause huge issues with Mexico as far as trade relations. That would be terrible. Like, people just don't get it. We can't just do whatever we want. Like, people say that, but it's only like a figure of speech. Like, we can't actually go do what we want because there's huge consequences to that. So we can't strike the cartel deals. And like, I could go through the whole 20-minute deal of why that wouldn't make any sense, but just trust me on it. It wouldn't make any sense to do that. It would cause far more damage than it would do any benefit. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to, also, by the way, before we move on, by the way, let's do a quick scan on Flight Radar 24. I forgot that a viewer wanted us to check something out. Apparently, there's some flight movements near Qatar that were quite interesting. I think a Stratotanker took off from Al-Udeid or Al-Udeid, whichever way you want to pronounce it. So let's see what's happening.
Holy moly, the airspace is active. It was not like this when we started the stream, by the way. I checked it before we went live, and it was empty. So we have a 737, most likely the UAE, followed by an Italian Air Force aerial tanker, I believe. And then we also have this U.S. Air Force Globemaster, which turned off its transponder, and the predictive flight path is showing it flying into Iran. It's not actually doing that, by the way. We also have another Globemaster flying in from Prestwick in the UK to Al-Udeid. And then we also have this Airbus A330 Voyager that apparently was took off from somewhere in Saudi Arabia. That's not ours. There's also a U.S. Air Force Pegasus that's apparently flying to Bay St. Louis. We also have a Qatari military aircraft that appears to be flying to Riyadh, or Kuwait City, sorry, but taking the long way around for some reason. Any other? What's up with the helicopters?
The Emirati Air Force.
Huh. That's interesting. I wonder why they got that many of them down there. We also got this Mao, which is a diamond twin star. And we also have this C-17 Globemaster of the UAE right there. So, oh, and the C-17 disappeared. So, yeah, it's a little bit of military air activity. What's going on over here, though? What are those Saudis doing? Oh, it's their little flight demonstration team. They're doing training. Look at that.
Oh, they're training for. Oh, that thing's moving fast. Look at that.
Yeah, they're doing that's like their air demonstration team, I believe. It's kind of like their version of like the Thunderbirds or Blue Angels, if I'm not mistaken. So it looks like they're doing their thing out here in the desert.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. They're very active.
Yeah, they said, okay, war in Iran's about to start, so let's make sure our air show is solid. Like they're like, let's go through the numbers, and a 1, and a 2, and a 3. You know, and then they go ho 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 ho. We are Santa's elves. But anyways, with that, I hope we were able to look at the aerospace situation out here. Well, what's going on in the States? What's going on over here? Anything interesting? Holy smokes. Why are so many helicopters airborne in LA right now?
Could it be the ICE situation?
Probably, because they're all police helicopters. Yeah, I mean, all of them are police helicopters.
I think it's those protests. Also, by the way, wasn't this where that guy or someone ran like a U-Haul or something, and they drove it through like one of these protests? Was that Los Angeles?
I think. I haven't really been following a lot of that stuff, honestly, because, you know, it's just going on in the background at this point compared to everything else. What's coming to Salt Lake? Oh, these are flying from Cheyenne to Sacramento. Oh.
I saw a bunch of lights like out in the distance, by the way. I was looking out of my window and I saw like a whole bunch of lights. I know what the planes look like coming to the airport. Like I've seen those before. I saw like it was like a sequence of 3 lights like over the western mountains out that way. And I was like, what is that? I couldn't figure out what it was, but they went away like after 10 minutes after I saw them. They just went away. It wasn't a passenger jet. I think it was maybe helicopters or something.
Probably Apaches, because they actually have an air wing of Apaches based out of this airport right here. And these are actually AH-64E Guardians. So these are the most advanced Apaches that we have in the Army aviation at the moment. We actually saw those the other day. You know, we drove by this place. Let me see if I can show it to y'all. They have a little, like, barrier, but you can see them out there. There's the Apaches right there. And they fly around a lot around here. Like, you'll see them all the time. Like I've never seen an Apache before in my life, folks, until we came out here, and now I've seen about maybe 8 of them in the past 2 months. So there's a decent amount of flights that they conduct here, and you also see the Black Hawks that they have as well. Pretty cool little deal, but it's based out of the South Valley Regional Airport. And this is apparently a part of the Utah Army National Guard, I assume, or maybe the U.S. Army. I'm not really sure. But we also have Epic 71, which is flying from Honolulu somewhere else. And, oh, what's going on down in San Diego? Oh, same deal as L.A. Oh, and they got a U.S. Customs and Border Protection Beach King up right now, circling outside of Tijuana. They're looking for the boats. You know, is probably what they're doing. So, let's see. Anything else interesting? Oh, what do we got here? Oh, we got a Mercury up.
Navy.
And we got 2 Mercuries up. Oh my God, we're all gonna die. The nukes are flying. Like, bro.
The doomsday planes are in the air. The doomsday planes are in the air. Red alert. Red alert.
I'll put money on it, man. There's somewhere out there on YouTube right now, a giant red thumbnail in white text that says like emergency alert, and it says doomsday planes airborne. Everyone's dying tonight. I can put money on it. That's probably happening right now somewhere.
The bombers are flying. The bombers are flying. EAM. EAM.
Man, outside of that, though, U.S. airspace is generally quiet as far as military flights. If I turn it on to domestic, though, and all flights, it'll start looking pretty busy. But, oh, what do we have down here? We have a U.S. Air Force C-17 that took off from St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's interesting. Anything else going on in the world? What's going on down in Africa? Oh, the Kenyan Air Force is up. The U.S. Air Force is up. And also there's a United Nations aircraft over in Mogadishu.
United Nations with an aircraft. Come on, hang it up. Put it back in the hangar.
Hey, stop what you're doing. F you, UN. Okay. Like, all right, we'll just sit by and watch it now. All right, you've been warned. You've been warned. What's going on in Japan, though? U.S. Air Force KC-135.
They're heading to Taiwan.
Oh, they're heading to Taiwan.
No, not really. I
I
doubt
was
it.
about to be like, what? I was like, I didn't catch that. And the Taiwanese Air Force 737 is up in the air right now. And there's also a Triton hanging out down around Taiwan right now. And
We always have those there. It seems like some drone is always lurking around Taiwan.
yeah, and there's a U.S. Navy Super Hercules, I think, heading to Okinawa at the moment. So that's interesting. It kind of did like a touch and go at Osan for some reason. If you see that right there, that's interesting. Let's see here. What else do we have? We have a U.S. Navy Clipper. We have a U.S. Air Force C-12 Huron. Basically just a whole bunch of transport flights going on out here right now. That's basically it. A lot of Hurons flying around Japan. Well, like a load of them. There's like 4 of them out here right now. And then we have another Hercules that took off from Matsuyama and is currently flying around Japan at the moment in orbit. So that's interesting as well. Anyways, enough of the U.S. Strategic Air Overlook. It's time for us to get on into the next one.
All right, so our next one is actually a $5 super chat from Cody Fritz.
Oh.
And thank you very much, Cody, for that support. He said, I wanted to see what the enforcer knows about Ukraine's main trains.
Ukraine's railways are generally very similar to Russia's railways because for, most of their history, they were a part of the Soviet railway system. But the Ukrainian state railways are a very interesting sort of a system. Don't actually know a lot about them, to be straight up with you. So I'll have to go and get you the information I can get off of the Wikipedia. They have this really cool multiple unit. That's actually cool looking. It's apparently a DPKR-3. Which is a Ukrainian-made multiple unit. That's really cool. And they also have this electric-made DS3. I'm not going to lie, I just don't really like Eastern European engines, like no matter where they're from. I just find them to look a little wonky. I'm really used to like that rugged American look, that like all of our General Electric and EMD units have. I really like that look. I like the British engines as well. And the German ones are pretty cool. But outside of that, most other locomotives and rolling stock in the world, I'm just not really, it doesn't vibe with me. Like, I don't know. I'm not the hugest fan of it. Let me see here. Like this, like these are all over Russia as well. Like, I just don't like them, like they're odd looking to me. They're odd because I'm so used to what's in America. To Europeans though, these things are, pretty cool. But just being from the United States, I just can't really get behind any of these things, yeah. So that's the best I can tell you. That's the best I can tell you here. So that is what it is. They do have a Christmas train though, and I think it uses that engine right here. So that's kind of neat. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
And our next one here goes to Terry, who said, regarding pet honey badgers. That was also the discussion we were having last night, by the way, about those pet honey badgers. But they said, look up Buckeye honey badgers.
Let's see.
What is this exactly? I'll be curious. What is this?
Buckeye honey badgers. Let's take a look at this.
Honey badgers, eh?
I can't really, let's see. So the AI overview says, features videos of real honey badgers known for their fearless nature with a Buckeye nod to Ohio. Actually, it's a YouTube channel. We wouldn't be able to show it. It would be a copyright issue. So, I do thank you for sharing that with us, but unfortunately we wouldn't be able to take a look at it live on air because it appears to be a YouTube channel and there could be copyright issues there.
I do see their Instagram page. So it looks like they raise honey badgers. It looks like it. And it looks like they're actually, I can't tell. It looks like they have them as pets possibly as well. Yeah, it looks like they're handling them and stuff like that. That's honestly crazy. These people are actually raising these things and treating it like a dog almost. That's kind of wild because the honey badger in nature is like the nuclear bomb of nature. Those things are dangerous. Dangerous is an understatement. They're vicious, but these appear to be pretty docile at least. Dealing with the fella in this video right here, so it's kind of wild actually. So you kind of can have them domesticated a little bit.
That's very interesting, actually. And also, Anthony, I was trying to look into that claim that someone made about something to deal with who, and it looks like there might might maybe be a little bit of information that would lead to that maybe being true. I'm trying to look into that at the moment, but that would be really interesting to find out. So, with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, it's interesting here. Let's see here. Hold on a second. So I'm noticing here there's an allegation by some other guy that's covering these protests and riots that allegedly he might have defamed this other guy that's a streamer as well. That wouldn't be out of the question. I mean, he defamed us. That's for damn sure.
And everyone else.
Yeah, like he has a thing for going around saying stuff that he doesn't know is true or that he knows is false. Is going around and saying it and repeating it, which is obviously something that you can't do. That's a lawsuit. So I wouldn't be shocked if he did, but I'm not really sure. But anyways, jumping into our next one here. This one goes to Ms. Disa, who said the electronic jammers are successfully limiting news getting out of Iran. And what do you know about them? And that's a good question right there, honestly, Ms. Disa. These electronic jammers that they just brought in from somewhere, which I don't know where they came from, they might have come from Russia, are able to block signals from the satellite ground receivers to the satellites in the sky. So, Enforcer, do we have any information about those, or can we find out what possibly they could be?
Unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of information about Iran's electromagnetic spectrum capabilities, or what we would call EW capabilities. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't really be able to go into a great deal of detail on that because there's not even a lot known online about Iran's electronic warfare capabilities.
Interesting. Well, that's a shame right there. I would like to know what that is, though. And let's see here. Satellite jammers. Also, by the way, I think the Russians tried to jam Starlink back in the day too, but I think Ukraine found a way around it because the Starlinks are, to my knowledge, are pretty resilient to jamming. I think they alternate between different frequencies, I think, to try to get around that kind of stuff. That's my layman's knowledge of it. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but let's see here. So, oh wow, like apparently there's a lot of different satellite jammers apparently that are out there. So yeah, sadly, I wouldn't know. We do know that, for example, the U.S. uses GPS and GNSS jamming all the time. Like they do that to like disorient the enemy in our areas where we're conducting war activities. But I don't know exactly what they're using inside of Iran. I would have a suspicion that they probably got something from Russia. I would imagine, because I don't think Iran had those on hand. So that could be something the Russians flew in when they were doing these flights.
I guess you could say they had it flown in. Ah!
Man, they were Russian. They were Russian for those jammers.
I gotta say, that was a good one. So with that, I hope we, unfortunately, were able to address our lack of intelligence on, well, lack of knowledge more so on that topic. I'd have to declare ignorance on that, sadly, because there's so many different sorts of systems they could be using, and systems we don't know about that they could be using, that it's just really hard to discern what it could even be and what its abilities are. That actually would be something that I would have to say is beyond our knowledge, and you generally have to consult with the U.S. Space Force, which probably would be the one handling that sort of stuff these days, to figure out what that could be, and then they probably wouldn't tell you either, unfortunately. So, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, like I'll have to tell you this later on with this one right here. There is a picture circulating of that particular individual we were just talking about, which I have never seen before, which is not what you'd call a flattering photo, to say the least. We're not going to show it on the air, obviously, but interesting. Looks like somebody's been doing some deep digging into his background, because I'm seeing that on X, on Twitter, that is. So,
Wait, can you put it under our likes tab on Twitter so I can see it here really quickly?
Yeah, I just put several things under the likes tab. Apparently, there's been a whole saga going on with him and some other people. He's found his new latest victims. Apparently, he's moved on from us and on to other people. So quite fascinating with that right there. But
what the hell?
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that, man. I don't know what the hell's up with that photo. That's crazy. That's oh geez. But anyways, moving on to our next question here. Our next one here goes to Jamie, who said, "What probability do you guys think that there is that Russia will start using tactical nukes in Ukraine as the conventional war goes badly for them?"
I would say that the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine is getting on up there, but when I say getting on up there, it's still a smaller percentage chance. I would say at maybe the greatest right now, it's maybe a 7 to 10% chance of a tactical nuclear weapon being used in Ukraine, but I'd still consider nuclear weapons usage to, by and large, be decently unlikely, given the fact that that's going to be opening up a Pandora's box that wouldn't be closed, and I think the Russians understand that as well as everyone else would. So, with that, I hope that does address that the best that I can fairly well. And man, I gotta tell you, man, I was looking at the stuff that you've been putting over here.
Holy moly, man! I'm seeing I'm seeing now what people were talking about when they were trying to tell us that something happened. I don't know the facts about this all the way, and I'm not into defaming people, so I'm not going to comment until I know all the facts. I'm smarter than that, but he's obviously not. He's not smarter than that because he defamed us in the past. This guy we're talking about, Hot Dog Man here, but. I'm starting to see what people are talking about. It looks like there's been a whole incident here that could get worse, actually, from the looks of it. It's a whole incident here with another streamer and himself that appears to be escalating between the two of them, which actually resulted in real-world consequences, it looks like, on camera that everybody's looking at. This is why you shouldn't engage in stupid activities, folks, by the way, because stupid stuff like this ends up happening where you have real-life consequences coming out of your stupidity that boils over online into real life. This is why you shouldn't do stuff like this, because this, based on what I'm looking at in these videos, this stupid provocation could have been totally avoided. But because people look for fights, like Mr. Hot Dog Man here, things get ugly and things get out of hand because people have too much time on their hands and they start fights with people that they shouldn't be starting fights with. So, very interesting with that.
I gotta say though, it looks like, folks, at least from what we can tell right now, looks like the hot dog man, the hot dogs man's days of hot dog vending might be coming to an end nowadays. Maybe so. So we'll keep an eye on that, folks. I'll be straight up honest with y'all. If his hot dog days come to an end here, and some sort of law enforcement action is taken against him, because apparently it like, at least from what I can tell, it looks as though the situation, at least if you can agree with me, Matthew, it doesn't look like that is good at all. It looks like there was some very questionable actions done there. This might actually lead to some legal action or law enforcement action being taken to bring around an end to the hot dog man days. So
I'm not really sure. I mean, it doesn't look good. I don't know what the whole story is here with this. It certainly doesn't look good at all. This whole situation. So I don't want to say like exactly what it is because, like I said, I don't want to get into talking about something I'm not totally sure about here. But I mean, just knowing that guy's character, I wouldn't put it past him to have literally started something. I wouldn't put it past him at all because he literally picked a fight with us out of the blue and started like making false statements, claiming that we were stealing fundraiser money and the statements that were like clearly defamatory, like literally like lying to harm our reputation. This guy did that to us. And it looks like he's doing that to somebody else, at least allegedly, according to some other guy out there. It looks like he's trying to do the same thing. So I don't know the whole story there, but I wouldn't be shocked personally.
Man, well, we'll be watching that. At least I'll be watching that one with great interest. I bet a lot of y'all can hear the smile that I got going on through the screen. But I'll be watching that one with great interest because it sounds like it might be finally coming around. Hot Dog Man's Judgment Day. We'll see though. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question here goes to none other than In Hansen, who said it just occurred to be that a handful of C-17 Globemasters could do a drive-by of Iran by deploying Rapid Dragon systems, and such a move would come as a complete surprise. And what are your thoughts?
You could technically do that. Like, you could. And that would actually be an incredibly cool thing to see put into action. But I think that we ought to save those sorts of capabilities for an adversary that's really worth its salt, like the Chinese. I think that the Rapid Dragon system should generally be used against the Chinese more so than anyone else. The Iranians can be dealt with through conventional air measures. The Israelis proved that by far in the 12-Day War. And I would never want to... Like, while I believe in superiority of firepower and full and truly overwhelming our enemy in terms of superior technology, firepower, and force availability, I don't believe that we should be using incredibly intricate and advanced weapon systems like that against Iran, because that also allows for China to gather data points on how that system works, which they don't have right now. And on top of that, it's wasting a valuable weapon system on what I would consider to be, at least tactically, a lesser adversary than the Chinese. So it would be a cool idea, but I generally hold that off to use on the Chinese and use more commonly used sorts of weaponry on the Iranians. So, well, the Iranian government and the armed forces, that is. But I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than Armchair Expert, who said, what weapons do Ukraine need this year to become more offensive on the front line against Russia?
I would say that if we wanted to say that they needed to become an offensive force, there really is no way that I could really think of helping them out with that. Because offensive actions these days in Ukraine are basically impossible for everyone, no matter how well equipped they are, because drone warfare has practically created a stalemate. So really what we would be looking for is defensive firepower, and in that regard, more artillery shells, generally more ammunition all around, along with replenishment of any lost equipment, say tanks, artillery, and such, that has been attrited over the war. That'll probably be the best thing to give them right now. And generally, artillery is not just a great defensive weapon, it's also a great offensive weapon as well. So I would say that the best thing that we could give Ukraine is tons and tons, I mean millions of shells, and probably several hundred or maybe a extra 1,000 artillery pieces. Most preferably some form of a self-propelled gun, whether it's wheeled or tracked. But that's what I would believe would be the best thing to give them for defensive and offensive capabilities, in my opinion. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than, let's see here. This one goes to Trog, who said, didn't we fly some B-2s over there to Iran straight from the USA last time, though? And do you think they might do that? And Trog, we actually do monitor deployments to Diego Garcia. That's a very easy spot to monitor because it's a very small island. I believe it's in the Indian Ocean, I believe. And you can see it from satellite real easy. So we haven't seen any deployments that we're aware of. They do have hangars on Diego Garcia that you could like hide aircraft in, but we saw them last time. We saw these like support tankers show up and things like that to Diego Garcia. We have not seen any deployments like that at this moment. So I don't think that's happened now. They could do it like in the next few days, but it hadn't happened now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that generally air operations, also just to clarify this, in Operation Midnight Hammer, the B-2s that conducted that operation didn't fly out of Diego Garcia. They actually flew directly out of Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Funnily enough, Mandy, I think we drove by Whiteman Air Force Base on our move, like out to.
We did.
Yeah, we did. Like I was just thinking about that. I was like, oh man, we did drive by that. But anyways, they took off from Whiteman Air Force Base and flew all the way from Missouri across the Atlantic, taking the shortest route available to Iran, bombed them, and then they turned around and flew back. I think they had to be refueled several times in the flight, but that's generally how that air operation was conducted. It is possible. But when we want to conduct larger operations against Iran that could completely neutralize or destroy the Iranian government and the Iranian armed forces, that sort of an air operation is very low intensity. They last for about 30 hours, the flight all the way there and back, and B-2s don't fly incredibly fast. They fly at about, I believe it's something like 460 miles per hour, so it's generally the speed of, say, an older 1950s era bomber is basically the speed that they fly at. So an incredibly long air operation. So the pilots are exhausted, like mentally and physically exhausted by the end of that air operation, meaning that they now have to go into a rest and actually rest for a while to be prepared for the next operation. And that means that those sorts of air operations would be highly low intensity, meaning that they would not be conducted enough to be able to suppress the Iranian armed forces or the government single-handedly, meaning that we would need a lot of forces much closer to Iran and in far larger volume and number, with a larger amount of pilots and aircraft available to be able to conduct high-intensity, high-tempo air operations over Iran. And that means that while a B-2 air sortie could be involved, and that could be done, we would still need to see that there is a large amount of elements of the U.S. Air Force and Navy that are conducting high-tempo, short-range air operations against the Iranian nation to see that their armed forces and government are truly suppressed and put down. That's probably the best approach that we could take. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on into the final question. Also, Real Patriot said almost 600 miles an hour. Let me go pull that up, because I always heard that the B-2 was a little slow. Maybe I'm thinking of the F-117. Let's see here. Do we have any info out there in the public about its speed? So its cruising speed is 560 miles an hour. So that is faster than what I was seeing. And its maximum speed is 630 miles an hour. So it is subsonic, but I was actually underestimating speed by a good bit. So thank you for clarifying that, Real Patriot. And so with that, folks, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be none other than, guess who? It's going to be none other than, well, actually, that was supposed to be a drum roll, but that was not a drum roll. That was not a drum roll. So we're going to do that a different way. Let's see here. Where'd my drum roll go? I literally had drum roll queued up just now. I was about to press that.
Our final question of the night is,
It's like I was introducing somebody as a clown. Thankfully, I hadn't said their name yet, so I didn't do that to anybody specific. But let me get them a different type of thing, because I don't know what happened to the drum roll I was supposed to be doing right there. But a huge shout out, by the way, to our last question of the night, which goes to none other than a live animal, who said, if the U.S. and Israel don't intervene in Iran, it might create a ripe condition for an extended civil war with all kinds of extremist groups filling the vacuum, like perhaps even that worst group, ISIS. And what are your thoughts?
ISIS actually wouldn't really have a good hold inside of Iran. We've never really seen ISIS a lot in Iran. They're there, but they're not an incredibly large or popular group from what we can tell, at least inside of Iran. In Syria, though, and Iraq, they have apparently decent amounts of followership. But outside of that, I would say that it probably would never turn into a civil war, because the Iranian government just does not have the cohesion nor the capability to really sustain a protracted war against a revolutionary or rebel group like that for an incredibly long period of time, like Syria. Because while Iran does have foreign support in the terms of the Russian Federation, they have no forces based inside of their country in their own support. So generally, I would say that the Iranian government, if put under enough pressure, will probably just pack up and walk away. That's what I would assume. So I don't really think the chances of civil war are high. It's still there, and I would say that you definitely are thinking very smartly about this. The chance of a civil war is there. But still, at this point, I would say just due to the fact of the massive massacres happening on the ground, now that we've been able to get a read on the heartbeat of this whole deal, and it looks like the Iranian government's conducting a massacre, I would say that generally, I would agree with you. It would be better to weigh in on the side of caution and start conducting military action in support of the revolution, regardless of the international optics of that, because we have a significant humanitarian explanation and casus belli, or a reason to join in on a war against the Iranian government at this point because of that. So I would say that I would agree with you for the larger part. I wouldn't say that the civil war is a high risk. It is a existent risk, but I would say it's on the lower percentage side. But definitely, I would say that at this point, I think that we need to respond just for the fact that there are thousands of innocents dying at the hands of the Iranian government right now, and for the humanitarian sake of things alone, the U.S. should not stand by and let that continue to happen, and then allow such a monstrous government to continue to survive in the region. So I hope that does address it the best I can, at least in my opinion, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much for enjoying the show tonight. We had at the peak tonight about 16,000 people here at the peak tonight, and 138,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. We're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have had each and every single one of y'all here with us tonight, and I also got to say that the fundraiser has done amazingly well. A huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again for being loyal members of the Leaf Spring Army and choosing the Enforcer channel to be your primary source of news. And so with that, folks, if there is enough news to make a short war video tomorrow, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that short war video. Yo! Aw, man. But beyond that...
man. Oh, man.
Aw, man, I might have gotten into some big shit. Aw, man. But anyways...
Oh, man, if only I was a real boy and not a punk.
Oh, man. But on that note, folks, we will see you all either tomorrow for the short war video or on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, folks, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraine, Heram Slava. Long live the Leaf Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight, and all 140,000 plus people that joined us on another Sunday night fundraiser stream. And a huge shout out for helping us to hit $2,600 raised for Ukraine yet again, for Razom For Ukraine, that is. And also, we will see you definitely Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly War News stream. And also, we will see you midday tomorrow for a short war video if there is enough news to cover, but we will have to see. But tomorrow is our first day off in a good minute, so we are going to be sure to enjoy that day off right there. Honestly, it's never really a day off, to be honest, because I'm always on Twitter. I'm always doing a short war video, so it's not really a day off, but at least I get to think that it's a day off. You know, you can at least think about having time off. It's always good, doing it that way, to think about it at least. But we will see you all then. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.